I found out today, if you're trying to get your name out there, you try and get your shit on Quibi because they let you keep the rights to whatever it is instead of buying it from you the way like Netflix or Amazon would.
Isn't Quibi like going under though?
The reason they don't buy the rights is because they can't afford to, Matthew.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, oh, we'll pay you in royalties if this thing ever takes off. Jeffrey Katzenberg.
All of the capital is gone. I know. Well, it was weird too because they're like their sell was not interesting. It's like content optimized for mobile viewing, which doesn't sound great to begin with because I think people want stuff that feels cinematic even if they are watching it on a screen the size of the palm of their hand.
Mm-hmm.
But also just all their offerings were like free IP stuff. It's like Victorian era short stories adapted into a modern context, among other things. Like, I remember one of their ads was for the Most Dangerous Game, and I'm like, shit, has it been that long since we had a Most Dangerous Game adaptation? Like,
it's like, and now they're coming out with Snow White and the Seven Dwarves the long way. Like, really? Do we need another adaptation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves?
Wait, for real?
No, I'm making it up. But like that's the only what is it? Public domain property I can think of. I mean, speaking of public domain, I mean Enola Holmes was based off of public domain property now, right? Because Sherlock Holmes is public domain, if I'm not mistaken.
That's very true.
Well, just wait until Dave Sims dies, and then every single thing you ever see will have Cerberus in it.
Cerebus, you mean?
Yeah, Cerebus, yes, because he's
well,
famously...
no, because he's too toxic, I guess, for the PC crowd to go near it.
Oh, well, that's okay. I mean, what's his name? H.P. Lovecraft was apparently like a racist, and all of these people.
Oh, H.P. Lovecraft is so much worse than Dave Sim, but like you could kind of argue that Lovecraft was a product of like Victorian morality and thinking, whereas Dave Sim is like pretty much just off the reservation crazy at this point. Like he challenged some other comic book artists to a boxing match because the guy disagreed with him politically.
How long? Like, I haven't heard about him or from him in years. I just like did a search of him probably like a year and a half ago, where he said that when he dies, he's gonna forego a copyright and just let his work enter the public domain. Which I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, a lot of his stuff he talks about with creator-owned stuff in my mind is kind of cool.
Well, he's the godfather of creator-owned comic books.
Yeah, he was supposed to, like, DC had hired him to be the artist on Batman, and then I looked at, like, I'm going to keep calling it Cerebus, but Cerberus, I looked at...
No, it is Cerebus.
Okay, Cerebus. I looked at the first couple issues of it, and I was like, God, man, DC was really hurting for good artists in the 70s. Holy shit.
So Cerebus is intentionally like misspelled as Cerebus and not Cerberus.
Okay. I read I bought like 3 of those big tomes because they were just, it was at a time. Should we just begin?
Sure.
All right.
She went under the wheels.
Affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And today's going to be kind of a free-for-all episode. There's nothing really amazingly interesting on that wouldn't take us 3 weeks to watch. So we kind of just want to do a recap, touch base, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So anyway, back to I'm going to fuck up the name. Dave Sims' creation that looks like a Tex Avery cartoon.
Cerebus the Aardvark?
Yes. When I started getting like heavy back into comics, I would go into my local comic store and I would see those big tomes of his books of just like, all the way across the board. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe someone did something like as crazy as this. And that's of course before I knew that he like got high on, or he dropped a ton of acid and was like, I'm going to make 300 issues of my creator-owned property. So
I know.
Yeah.
Well, Dave Sim is always interesting because his main work is so gigantic and it's so sprawling, and that it starts off as kind of like a comedy comic, and then an adventure comic, and then like just this really long philosophical work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting because he did do a bunch of acid, and had to be hospitalized for schizophrenia-like symptoms.
I mean, I didn't get too far into his thing. I think I bought like 3 books and I never completed one of them because they're just the writing. There's just so much text.
Yeah.
And the thing that to me is the best part of the whole series, opinions vary, but is the fact that he brought in a background illustrator at one point.
Yep.
And like the background illustrator is freaking amazing.
Oh, the background illustrations in once he brings the guy in, they're like
Gerhard,
good.
Shout out. Yeah, he's amazing. And I had no interest in reading the rest of it. I was just like, can I just see like a book of backgrounds by this guy? He was just so good.
From what I've heard from people who have read the whole thing, like there's a sweet spot kind of early on and towards the middle where like it's like right around where he hires a background artist to do all his backgrounds, and he starts taking the comic away from being like a standard like comedy adventure to being more serious and kind of letting his personal philosophy and personality come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it gets really interesting. And then I think like about halfway through to the end, it gets really, really philosophical and very, very political as well, to the point where it just overwhelms everything else. It's like when people say athletes should just stick to sports, except like from the right, if that makes sense.
People were like, okay, we understand that you want to like promote your, because what isn't one of his main things, like he promotes like in his work there's a lot of misogyny.
Yes, so it's it's like, people should, like, you in the news lately with like LeBron and the NFL and all the riots and stuff, people are like, these athletes should just stick to sports and stop talking about politics. It was kind of like that sort of effect with Cerebus, but instead of espousing left-wing views, his right-wing views were taking away from the story and the artistry of what he was doing. Because like there were certain, like, a lot of people complained that like it stopped being an interesting comic book and it was just him ranting about how much he hates women, or like about like really esoteric religious stuff. And then supposedly like the last couple issues are really good again because they're almost like pretty self-aware about like how the comic has devolved into a screed essentially, and is no longer a comic book. And it's about Cerebus has sort of turned from this adventurer to like this almost psychotically bitter old man representing Dave Sim.
Right.
And he's wondering if, like, at the end of this really long work, Cerebus, the character, is at the end of his very long life, like, what did it really amount to?
Mm-hmm.
So, from what I've heard, it starts off all right, it gets amazing, then it turns to complete shit, and then it's really good at the very end.
Yeah. I like, that first volume is really... The art is really not good. And as a guy who, like, half of the point of entry for comics is, like, how good your art is.
Yep.
Like, it makes it even harder to read. And then...
Yeah. Well, it's like The Killing Joke. The art is the only thing that makes it readable.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the last joke at the end where he's like, no, because you're going to turn off the beam. And then, like, Batman and Joker start laughing. I'm like, oh, that's a fun little moment. That's funny.
That's like it though. That as far as like fun little story moments, the rest is like, wow, Brian Bolland sure is he's great at drawing, isn't he?
Man, isn't he good at drawing and coloring? Like, because I haven't read the John Higgins colored version of it. I read the re-release where like Brian Bolland went in Photoshop and like painstakingly made it look
corrected everything.
Well, the John Higgins stuff is good too, but like, modern coloring versus old coloring and old printing press and stuff like that.
I kind of disagree. The John Higgins stuff is pretty gaudy at times. Where it's like Brian Bolland's artwork needs... Well, I mean, most of Brian Bolland's career, his stuff was never colored in.
Right.
You know, all his stuff with 2000 AD, Judge Dredd and all that, it's just black ink on paper. So I think, one, you have to have a very considerate touch when coloring his drawings, but also, like, his style did not mesh well at all with... like the 1980s, just bright, neon, everything colors.
We went from having 8 colors to thousands of colors, and we need to use every single one with a lot of airbrushing.
Well, it's just weird, too, because, like, you know, comic books for a long time had, like, super duper bright colors, and it was only kind of in the 90s, or maybe the 80s as well, where they started toning it down a little bit. Like, you saw it in the 80s with artists who painted their own comics. They would have more like range and nuance in the colors they used, whereas I think like a lot of the standard color printing was still pretty just... It looked like you were walking into a candy... Every panel was like walking into a candy store. It was like, you know, bubblegum wrappers and Reese's cups, and it just... They didn't look like people in places.
Yeah. Well, hey man, you had to sell your comic book, so you had to make the colors as bright and like contrasty as possible, unlike every other person who was doing the exact same thing.
I know, seriously.
So naturally to pick it up. I mean, again, like I think coloring in comic books has gotten a lot better, but there was that time in the 90s, like you said, where they were using a lot of airbrushing and like trying to make it look like, oh, we can... It's like Photoshop just got introduced, and so now they have more ability to color it, but the coloring, it wasn't complementary to a lot of the artists. And even now, most times when they color comic books, it's like it's still not necessarily complementary. There aren't that many people who like fully visualize it like Dave Gibbons did in Watchmen, where he's like, oh, I can use this to my advantage, or like Kevin Nolan does his own coloring. And because of
that's the thing. Like a lot of the best comic book art is from artists who don't just pencil it, but they also ink it and color it themselves. Like, I mean, Alex Ross obviously is the extreme example with his paintings. But like Bill Sienkiewicz was kind of ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. I think Elektra Assassin might be one of my favorite comics of all time, just because of Sienkiewicz's paintings in it.
Yeah, well, and he does like so. To be fair, Bob Ross, Alex Ross. Bob Ross also does painting, but Alex Ross almost exclusively does like watercolor or gouache painting. Gosh, painting. But he does painting. Yeah. And Bill Sienkiewicz like throws everything at the drawing
he does,
board.
Like, mixed media fucking comic books.
His Twitter account, like whenever anyone passes, he'll do like a portrait of them, and it's like surprisingly, Bill Sienkiewicz is really good at portrait work. But
his portraits are sick.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, love or hate Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin on Batman on Fat Man on Batman did have Bill Sienkiewicz on talking about his career, and like it's really cool listening to him talk about like, oh yeah, you know, I never thought I was good enough to be an artist for a long time, and then like finally people started letting me develop my own style, and I realized that like when I did it this way, like people started buying it, and so I just kind of continued to develop my own style. So I mean, I love listening to artists talk about that kind of stuff. So like, you know, cross plug, I guess, for that episode. I'll see if I can find it and put it in the links. Yeah, they're like, I mean, Kevin Nolan is probably, especially recently, he's probably one of my most influential comic artists that I've seen, just because like from the top down, the way he lays out a page, the way he inks, like the way he, whenever he inks anyone, you can almost tell that it's a Kevin Nolan inking it. And then like if he goes the extra mile and gets to color it, then even though everything looks like it's all really just like different shades of brown, it's still fantastic.
Yeah.
So Kevin Nolan's awesome. He's one of my favorites. Even though all of his people look like really depressed, like because all of their eyes are like triangles. But it's just, he's so unique. He's got such a very like a distinct style that I really like. Anyway, what have you been watching lately? The 3 things that you've had a chance to watch over the last 3 months.
I know. Well, I've actually watched a number of things in the past just 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
Or like week and a half. So I watched Reanimator and From Beyond, which I had wanted to see for a while. And those are probably the only two Stuart Gordon movies I will ever see.
Oh, you're not going to see Dagon?
No. So, like, I mean, it's funny because they're both movies are based on, you know, Lovecraft short stories, but very loosely based, and they transpose a lot of things to the 1980s. And they have a lot of the same cast, like Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton are main characters in both movies. They both are not, like, Reanimator is, I think, intentionally comedic, whereas From Beyond is just not particularly scary. Neither movie's scary, even though they are, like, horror movies, technically.
Well, I think Reanimator is more like gross out type of thing, right? I'm guessing both of them are.
They're both pretty gross. I mean, they do a lot of really cool practical special effects, like low budget practical special effects. Like there's a scene in From Beyond where this guy is like eaten by bees, and it's pretty amazingly rendered. And then like the pervert scientist who keeps coming back as like an interdimensional monster, he always looks just ultra disgusting. Anytime he shows up, like there's a great bit at the end of From Beyond where, you know, the pervert scientist. So the plot of From Beyond is there's a mad scientist who's also this crazy sex pervert and his assistant. They build a resonator machine that activates your pituitary gland so you can perceive creatures from another dimension. So the main scientist gets eaten by one of these interdimensional creatures and ends up taking over it. And he continually tries to come back into our world using the resonator to devour people and consume their consciousness, which he believes is like the ultimate in sensual pleasure because he's a creep. And then his assistant, you know, is broken out of a psychiatric hospital by another psychiatrist, and they're helped by a policeman to try and like figure out, you know, okay, like what's going on with this resonator and how do they stop the evil scientist from coming through and fucking shit up. Anyway, crazy antics ensue, and eventually at the end, you know, the scientist's assistant, played by Jeffrey Combs, has been exposed to the resonator so much, his pituitary gland shoots out of his head, and he like goes completely insane and starts like eating people's eyes. And Barbara Crampton's able to stop him by ripping out his pituitary gland entirely. She actually bites it off. And then he's like back to normal. So then they team up again to stop the evil scientist. But the evil scientist turns into like a flying monster and eats Jeffrey Combs' head off. So then Barbara Crampton's trying to shut off the resonator and destroy it. But, you know, she can't because this monster gets a hold of her. And then it turns out that Jeffrey Combs' consciousness is still in the monster as well. So he and the evil scientist are fighting for control of like this crazy interdimensional, completely practical effect monster. And their like fight inside of the goop is amazing. Because like this monster like turns into all these different things, and it like turns into both of them, and they're like fighting each other. And like you know, Jeffrey Combs like comes out of one part of the monster and bites off like its own leg, you know, to free Barbara Crampton so she can blow up the machine. Like that whole scene is really cool. But, you know, all in all, both movies are like they're solid witnesses. They're good fun. They're nice and short too. They're like under 90 minutes.
But why won't you visit the rest of his extensive filmography?
Because people peak and decline. You know, there's a reason that Reanimator and From Beyond are Stuart Gordon's two most famous movies, and no one has heard of anything else he's ever done.
What about let's see, I thought there was a sequel to Reanimator, but I guess he did not direct that.
No, he wasn't really involved with that.
Got it.
But
I actually I've seen two of his other movies.
Really?
Yeah. I've seen Edmund because I was big on David Mamet for a while back in like the mid 2000s.
Oh, that's right. 2010s. I've seen Edmund as well.
And
oh, Jesus.
And then I saw Dagon, which was just like it was It was good, but really depressing.
Yeah.
Because the monster wins at the end. Spoilers. And so, like, I was just like, because my friends wanted to watch something Lovecraftian, so, like, you know, some people got high. I was not into the marijuanas at that point anymore. But some people got high. I got a little drunk, and I was just like, what the fuck am I watching? And it's still visually, like, really cool, and there's still a reliance on a lot of practical effects, but I was just like, what is this? Oh, boobies. Okay, so that's...
I tried to, like, suppress all memory of Edmund.
I don't blame you.
Because it's like, I remember I was really bored on a summer afternoon when I was like maybe, I don't know, I want to say like 14 or so. And I was just scrolling through channels and William H. Macy shows up on the screen. And this is like the first recognizable actor I've seen in like 15 channels. So I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'll see what this is. And it's at the beginning of the movie, and he's like having a breakdown and yelling about all this crazy shit. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. I'm morbidly curious what's going to happen. And then it just devolves from there. And I think halfway through, I'm like, this movie's weird. I changed it to like Cartoon Network or something.
Like, to be fair, I think that has more to do with David Mamet than it does Stuart Gordon, but...
Oh, absolutely, but still.
It was weird to say the least. You mean you didn't watch Honey, I Blew Up the Kids, who he was a producer on, so never mind.
Why no, I didn't.
And he had a part, like, I don't know.
He wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah. Let's get the Reanimator guy to write a kids movie.
Honey, I fucking murdered our children.
Well, no,
that's
it had
the
to
third
be...
one in the series.
And then the Stuart Gordon directed one. Honey, I combined the kids with evil sea monsters, with an evil sea monster god, and it ends with like Rick Moranis fighting Cthulhu for the fate of the world.
No. So the third one is Honey, I Fucking Killed the Kids, starring Rick Moranis. The fourth one is Honey, I Reanimated the Kids, starring Rick Moranis and Jeffrey Combs. And Barbara Crampton.
Of course.
And then the fifth one is Honey, the kids are like crazy monsters from another dimension.
The first half of the movie is just the kids worshiping Cthulhu.
Oh,
and then at the end, the only way that they can win is if like Rick Moranis teams up with Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton, and like they fuse together into a super Stuart Gordon robot type thing to fight Cthulhu, which is like completely against every other kind of editing or ending he has. But you know, it's fun to dream of old Rick Moranis who got punched in New York, like coming back for
why did he get
the kids ride?
Why did he get punched in New York? What was all that about?
I have no idea. I just saw it popping up everywhere, and everyone's like, out of all the things in 2020, this is the biggest aggression. And I was like, I mean, I understand that, you know, for comedic effect, and like, don't get me wrong, I love Rick Moranis as well, but like, out of everything in 2020? But no, I don't really know anything about it. I saw it pop up, and I was like, okay. Because I know Rick Moranis is working with like Ryan Reynolds to come back into movies now that all of his kids are like grown up. So he's like, oh yeah, I'll probably do some small acting projects now.
Yeah. I mean, good for Moranis, honestly, like quitting acting just to be a good dad. Yeah. Like, I'm not against that at all. I think that's a good thing. I don't understand why he needs to come back now, but I guess if he likes acting that much, sure.
Well, I mean, you know, if I were him and like my kids are all grown up and they're doing their own thing and like, oh, I can take off a month or a couple of months and do this thing that I read and I find interesting, or do that thing that I read and find interesting. I mean, he doesn't have to do a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. He gets to do whatever he wants to, kind of like Sean Connery at the end of his career, although heaven forbid Rick Moranis find the League of Extraordinary Men equivalent for him. Oh God.
Every time Sean Connery comes up in conversation, I end up Googling him just to see if he's dead or not. He's still alive.
He's still going.
Going. I mean, he's alive.
Well, he's not going.
I wouldn't say he's going.
It's not like Kirk Douglas, where Kirk Douglas was like doing shit until the day he died. It's like Sean Connery is slowly like withering away, looking at like Dragonheart and James Bond and
Well, I've
Entrapment
heard he's
where
pretty
it went.
much senile at this point, which is kind of why he's not in a lot of. Well, I mean, which is kind of why he retired.
Yeah, I know that's why Jack Nicholson stepped back, was because he was having trouble remembering lines.
Oy.
So yeah, so I think we won't see a lot of Jack Nicholson. Well, I mean, Sean Connery
Still
turned
remembers
down,
what his seat is at the Staples Center.
as he like rolls out. In a couple of years, he's gonna be like rolling out. He's gonna be the size of the Kingpin, just flying out of his wheelchair.
He's gonna have to buy 2 season tickets.
How old is Jack Nicholson even married anymore? Like, how old is his current? Like, he's like the original Leonardo DiCaprio, where like he would just trade in his wife whenever they, like, every 10 years get a new wife.
Yeah, I don't think he's married. He's younger than Sean Connery though.
Yeah. Well, Sean Connery was in his 20s in the 60s, and Jack Nicholson didn't really come on board until the end of the 60s.
That's
right?
true.
'Cause that's when Easy Rider came out. It was end of the 60s. Jack Nicholson, man.
When did 5 Easy Pieces come out?
I don't know.
Oh, 1970. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
kind of related to Jack Nicholson, because he's always in movies and in real life is with women who really should be someone their own age. One of the other movies I watched recently was Funny Face, starring Fred Astaire and Audrey Hepburn.
Ah,
And
that's weird.
Yeah, well, it was, it was a movie night with the missus, and she likes Audrey Hepburn, and she likes older movies, so it was free on Prime. And we're like, hey, screw it, let's see what this is about.
You're like getting all of your education of like Turner Classic Movies is just your girlfriend just like, hey, I want to watch this movie. I guess it is couples movie night.
Yeah,
Let's turn on the Turner Classic Movie.
Well, the funny thing, we both agreed, Funny Face is kind of shit. Like, it's weird because, Fred Astaire has been a leading man since like the 1930s.
Yeah.
And this movie was made in probably the 60s, or if not the 50s at least. And so, you got Audrey Hepburn, who's, young Audrey Hepburn, and then Fred Astaire looks like a fucking vampire. He's like dancing around like Nosferatu. It's really bizarre.
He sucks the blood out of all of his young co-stars.
I know. Well, the other thing too is like he's like super romantically aggressive towards Hepburn, and it's just like, it's literally Nosferatu. Like the vampire keeps going after that one chick, and like the vampire in Nosferatu dies because he's like too horny for his own good, essentially. Like, you remember at the end of the movie, the woman's like pretending to be asleep, and he's like, yeah, like he's so into trying to get her that he doesn't realize the sun is coming up.
That's Fred Astaire, but he's afraid of just like the Grim Reaper ready to get him.
Pretty much.
His plastic surgeon, I guess. 1957, directed by Stanley Donen.
Oh, okay, so not quite the 60s, but
no, it's close enough.
I mean, the movie sucks for many more reasons than just the age gap between Fred Astaire and Audrey Hepburn. Its story is basically non-existent. It's like how superhero movies we're oversaturated with them today, to the point where like there's a lot of superhero movies now are just lazy garbage.
Yeah, or they just change the genre to
where it's just an excuse to have, like, we just need an excuse to put superheroes on the screen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and then students of film history would know that musicals had the same level of popularity in the 1950s and 60s, where it was just musicals everywhere all the time. And this felt like the Justice League of musicals, you know what I mean? Like, it was just slapped together because, like, we need a musical for the third quarter, you know? But yeah, it's like, everything feels very staged, like they're running around on a stage and there's a very clear fourth wall that they do not breach. So the blocking and the camera work is all weird in that way. Everyone talks strangely, like there's all these fucking sequences that you would only find in a medium as abominable as musical theater, like where, you know, there's a woman who's an actual character and has a name, and she's talking entirely to herself. Like she's having this really long, ultra theatrical, over the top conversation with herself. And then there's a bunch of extras following her around, like nodding, saying yes, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And this is like the kind of shit you would see in some shitty musical. And then she's like, you know, trying to solve a problem, and she's solving the problem by talking to herself, and it's very staged. And then, you know, when she's like, I've got it, an idea, and then she breaks out into song. And it's like, I want to die. This is horrible. And the whole movie's like that. It's like just bizarro setups for terrible songs, and there's no like logic to it. Everyone's yelling all the time because I think they think that they're on a stage, and when you're a theater actor, you yell all the time because people in the back of the room have to hear you. It's like, this is a fucking movie. You don't have to scream all your fucking dialogue, man. And then like, God, they land in Paris and then do like the Paris tourism video with a song and dance. And it's awful and cringy. And there's a scene where Fred Astaire and this magazine editor who sings the song at the beginning that I was talking about, they disguise themselves as French beatniks to like break into this French beatnik meeting that Audrey Hepburn is in because she's like super into their like lifestyle or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they pretend to be two people on the guest list who are musicians. And they're like, okay, you know, like, it's your turn to perform. And they're like, oh, we gotta give him a show, huh? And then they break out into this song, but it's really bizarre because there's like a full orchestra in the background, and they're singing and dancing, and Fred Astaire has a guitar that he doesn't play. He just kind of slaps it. But like, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, they're singing and dancing with a full orchestra behind them that's not in the room, which these people can't hear. So they must look fucking insane right now. And the song they sing is terrible. Like, everything's... like, I think all the songs in the movie are from the Gershwins, and they all suck. Yeah. Like, every single one of them is bad. Yeah, the movie's not good. It's like laughably bad. It was fun because it's hilarious how like it's like the incoherent ramblings of a person who just got hit in the head with a truck, you know. So yeah,
it's strange. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture that year. Just kidding, it wasn't nominated.
I almost had a heart attack. Jesus.
Yeah, I haven't seen Funny Face. The only Fred Astaire movies I'd probably ever watch are the ones that star Rita Hayworth, because, you know, Rita Hayworth. But yeah, I'm sorry to hear that a movie called Funny Face was a fucking horrible travesty for you. Like, no offense, but I feel like the name Funny Face as a movie, unless it's some sort of like deranged like German horror film, is just not going to be good.
Oh my god. Okay, you want to know how bad the age gap is? So Funny Face is a musical from 1927.
Oh no. Oh no.
And its Broadway debut in 1927 was starring Fred Astaire
the main character.
As the main character. So Fred Astaire reprised his role 30 years later opposite a woman who wasn't even born at the time. Like, that's how fucked their age gap is. Also, the other thing that's ridiculous about the movie is the movie's called Funny Face because, you know, Audrey Hepburn is like a bookshop clerk, and she kind of wanders into a photo shoot for a fashion magazine. Fred Astaire's the photographer, and then there's like this kind of Devil Wears Prada-ish lady who's the editor. And the editor is trying to come up with a new campaign, and it's like, we need like a model for this. And Fred Astaire has a picture with Audrey Hepburn in the background. He's like, she's got to be our model. And the editor's like, no way, she's got a funny face. She would never do. And then he's like, no, but her funny face is part of her charm. And I'm like, what fucking universe would you, like, does it make sense to say that about Audrey Hepburn and not literally any other woman in the movie?
And not, like, I don't know, maybe freaking Fred Astaire's face.
I know, yeah, Fred Astaire is the one who looks like freaking Jack Nicholson in this. So it's called Funny Face because in the universe of this
Audrey
movie,
Hepburn has a,
Audrey
quote,
Hepburn
funny
is weird
face.
looking.
I mean, like, Audrey Hepburn, I'm not going to say she's weird looking, but she has a very unique face. So I can understand why they would say, oh yeah, it's her. She's got a unique look. I mean, she looks like a twig, and then and yet like she has all of these like somewhat exotic features. Like she has a very round head, she has very distinct eyes, but like a funny face. That's like trying to make me believe that Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady is like a poor Cockney woman who is not very attractive on the outside when you first meet her. Like, no, you have to put a lot of old woman makeup on her to make her look ugly like that.
Well,
Funny
it's also
face.
like, trying to believe Audrey Hepburn is a funny face is like trying to believe she's American. Which I think they also try to convince you of in this movie, but obviously it doesn't work. She's like, oh yes, I'm from America. Howdy, partner. May I have a hamburger, please? Oh, bloody hell. Like,
where she's like, oh, may I have some biscuits? I mean cookies. Ha ha ha. Like, what? Don't forget, like, I feel like Audrey Hepburn has a career of, like, they always paired her off with men who are always substantially older than her. Because, like, there's Funny Face with Fred Astaire, and then there's Sabrina with Humphrey Bogart, and then there's Charade, with our favorite actor of all time, well, one of our favorite old actor names of all time, Archibald Leach. So, so I feel like there was like she was just like the young woman that they'd always put with older men, kind of like what's her name, Grace Kelly was as well for a time. It's just Hollywood back in the golden age of Hollywood. There's stuff that I find really interesting, but also stuff that's just really creepy.
Yeah. So Audrey Hepburn was a solid 30 years younger than Fred Astaire in Funny Face.
That's not the worst age gap I've seen.
It's not the worst.
But it's not. I mean, what was Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei's age gap? Like, that had to have been pretty big in My Cousin Vinny.
I don't know. Never seen My Cousin Vinny.
I haven't seen that either. There was another one that I saw where it was like you look back on it and like the girl is like she's like 26 and the guy in it is like 56 or something like that. I mean, almost all of the 80s Roger Moore James Bond movies were like that. Oh, yeah. It was Die Another Day with Rosamund Pike. She was like 25 or something, and Pierce Brosnan was like pushing 60. So,
wait, what?
Something like, yeah, let's see here. How old is Pierce Brosnan?
I think he's pushing, he's pushing 70, Jesus.
Yeah, he's old. Yeah. He's old, but looks good, except for, like, the top of his head. You can see he's clearly losing a lot of hair. So he's 67, and Rosamund Pike, because I remember I was looking this up, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like, what? And she's 41, so it's not that bad. It's only a 26 year age gap, so I guess it's not that bad. But still, it's still creepy as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's Funny Face. It stinks. It's not good. There's also like a sequence in the middle where Fred Astaire does this long dance number.
I was about to ask about that. Yeah,
just kind of in a square outside of Audrey Hepburn's window. Mm-hmm. And during this dance number, like, he kind of mimes a bunch of different activities. Like he's a matador fighting a bull, and then he's like playing golf, and then he's playing baseball, and like the music changes to accompany whatever he's miming out. But like, I'm sitting there thinking like, what the fuck does bullfighting, baseball, and golf have to do with each other or the story or Paris or photography or modeling or literally anything that's going on? It's just like Fred Astaire's like, hey, I have a cane in this scene. I could dance around with the cane and pretend to be a bullfighter, and then I could pretend to be a baseball player. And the Stanley Donen, probably because his brain had gone completely soft at this point, was like, yeah, sure, what, I don't care, whatever.
I was gonna say, wasn't he relatively young at that point? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, wait, he did Singing in the Rain, didn't he? It's like,
well, he did Singing in the Rain, and then nothing else good or interesting.
Well, yeah.
Ever after.
Yeah.
Or before, really, if we're being honest.
Okay, granted the dance number was weird, but was it at least good? And I'll tell you why, because I've got were the dance numbers at least good?
No.
Okay.
Well, you could there were a lot of background dancers who you could tell were like good at their job, but Audrey Hepburn, she's fine. The lady who plays the editor could not dance to save her life. And then Fred Astaire, Fred Astaire's a good dancer, but he's also 60 in this movie. So, age does things to people.
It's like the Robert De Niro elbow in The Irishman. It's like, Fred Astaire's 60-year-old legs are showing their age. He's got like a weird wobble on one of his legs or something.
I mean, he's reasonably athletic for how old he was, but, he's a far cry from what he could do in the... when he was 30 in 1927 when this fucking play was written.
I will say that, like, I'm biased against Fred Astaire because it seems like to me he was a dick to his co-stars because he demanded that all of the dance numbers that he do be done in one take, and he would dance his co-stars until their toes would bleed. But here's the difference.
Are you sure you're not thinking about Gene Kelly?
No,
because I've heard the exact same shit about him.
Oh, really? I know. I'm pretty sure I've heard this about Fred Astaire because this was like one of those things about Fred Astaire. It was like, no, it has to be perfect, and Ginger Rogers and stuff. Like, Fred Astaire would be wearing shoes that were uncomfortable because they were dress shoes, but at least, they were shoes. And his co-stars would be wearing high heels and like extremely painful shoes. And granted, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the co-stars had to do more difficult moves because on average, women have more complicated dance maneuvers they have to do than men. Men have to do lifting, and they have to do a couple of things here and there if they're able to. So the women's feet would be bleeding, and then they would have to do another take and another take while they're wearing these really uncomfortable shoes. And there's just something about it that just, like, Fred Astaire being so demanding and not understanding what his co-star goes through just makes him seem like a dick of a guy. And I'm sure it's partially like the time period they were in. But I always, I know people find it so romantic on his movies when they're dancing and on clouds and it looks so good for the camera, but just knowing behind the scenes that Ginger Rogers had bandages filled with cleaning to make sure that she could clean off her toenails that she's about to pull off just for the sake of the shoot, that kind of dampens the whole sensation for me. But that's just me.
Well, I mean, there's no sensation to be dampened, so
I guess not. I don't think you're going to be watching. I need to pull a random Fred Astaire movie now.
Gay divorce.
I was going to say Holiday Inn, and I was like, wait a second. Yeah, gay divorce. That's better. Back when gay meant something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, funny face. Oh my god. Ugh. It'd be funny if Fred Astaire was actually gay, and it was one of those tragic he was gay and nobody in Hollywood knew. And like 58 prostitutes come out like years later and like, he was gay? Like,
Well, I mean, it's weird how social perceptions of homosexuality have changed, because it's like only in that time could you like wear those suits and sing and dance around on stage and everyone would be like, oh yeah, he's definitely straight, everyone's straight. And that, like, if Fred Astaire was alive now and working now, everyone would assume he was gay until proven otherwise.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about it. It's like, well, he married someone in 1933, and they were married until she died in 1954, and then he didn't marry again until the 1980s. Like, my mind just... I just went off into the complete wrong direction. I'm like, So, yeah, but like I said, he had a couple of movies with Rita Hayworth that I'd be interested in watching, mainly for Rita Hayworth and not necessarily for Fred Astaire.
Wait, what's special about Rita Hayworth?
She's hot. That's about it.
That's not very interesting.
Well, did you see? Well, like, she's an interesting dancer. She has an interesting look about her. But really, yeah, that's really it. Like, Gilda is a hot mess of a movie script wise.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoy it, and she does a good job. There's this moment where she's pleading with the guy. It's like, I swear I didn't sleep with that man. I swear I didn't sleep with it. And then at the end, like, they're wrapping up the entire story, and he's like, honey, I know you didn't sleep with him. I totally believe you. And like, if this were actually made today, they would have to do a lot more legwork to make you think like, yeah, she clearly didn't sleep with that other dude that she clearly slept with.
I know. Well, it's interesting, how often musicals just kind of...
Well, Gilda's not a musical.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a noir. It's a film noir. Yeah.
Anyway.
I like it a lot. I like it a lot, but the script itself is just a hot mess. But
yeah. Well, it's just weird how a lot of movies from that time, I guess I will say, but musicals in particular, will shatter the rules of reality for, just to wedge in a musical number or for plot convenience or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just interesting, like, how much more cynical audiences are now, where they're just not going to accept things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
which might have to do with why musicals are, basically a non-entity now. Like, no one watches them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll post a couple of links of, like, if you're interested in the decline of the movie musical and why it's been harder for audiences to accept musicals lately. Like, they're harder
to accept because they're bad, Matthew. They're harder to accept because the 70s happened and then we had good movies.
Well, says the guy who one of his top movies of the last 10 years was La La Land.
That's because it's like the only musical I've ever seen that even remotely approaches like being realistic.
My brother hates musicals, or used to, and his wife forced him to watch Chicago, and so he's like, he's kind of putzing along with Chicago, and he's like, oh God, this music, and like, oh, why are they singing now? They're singing now. Oh, they're singing now. And then like the end of the movie, you've seen Chicago? Can I spoil it?
I've not seen it. You may spoil it because I will never see it.
Oh, good. I feel like Chicago is one of the more overrated, sort of like, because it started the career of the guy who directed the Into the Woods movie and the Fourth Pirate, Marshall, the guy who did Memoirs of Vacation. I think he's kind of overrated as a director anyway. But
who?
God, what's his name? It's now I have to look it up. But the end of the movie comes and like she's acquitted of her crime and like she's free to go and she's like, oh yeah, I'm free to go. And then all of the attention goes away from her and she's like, what? And she like loses all of the attention. And then like suddenly it clicked in my brother's mind and it was like, oh my God, this is so funny, because like the whole thing was all about her getting as much attention as possible. And then as soon as she doesn't have any attention anymore, she's like, no, now I gotta go find some other schmuck to kill so I can get the attention back on me. So he liked that musical or that movie specifically because it was all about how it was kind of like an inversion of what most people typically think of musicals, where it's like everything ends happy and song makes the world better and this and that.
And Rob Marshall.
Yeah. The other Marshall. The not as good one. To go along with Penny and Frank and Gary. He's not related to any of them. I'm totally kidding about that. He's not related to the Marshall family. But I mean, yeah, I think like I think the more interesting thing is like a lot of people who say like, well, because the modern movie musical aside from La La Land is basically like you have the Tom Hooper stuff where it's like gritty realism, or you have the sort of like,
it's not gritty realism, more like just grittyism.
Gritty. Well, yeah, you have like the handheld camera and like everyone like what's his name? Hugh Jackman crawls through a pile of shit to get to the end of the movie, and like it's like look at how realistic this is as Hugh Jackman is singing.
It's not realistic. It's like okay,
no.
That's the problem. It's like if you took the Wachowski brothers Speed Racer and reshot it with handheld camera, that would make it
desaturated
realistic.
Color values and like a lot of like blurry angles and shit. Like
just shaky handheld camera work, but everything else is the same.
Well, desaturated
does not make it
colors
realistic.
have to, because like that's the other thing. Like everyone's like, oh, it's realistic because the colors look like Saving Private Ryan. It's all desaturated, so you'd have to do that too.
What? But like the fucking Tom Hooper Les Mis has prisoners pulling like a 3 billion pound rope and doing like physical feats that are completely impossible. Like it's so like blown out of proportion, and like when Javert falls into the fountain that's so massive it couldn't possibly actually exist. Like it's very fantastical. Or like it's like saying fucking Cats is realistic because it is weird camera work.
Right, they're trying to get but see like that's what he's going for is like, and that's the problem is musicals are not realistic. And so in order to bring some grounding of realism, I guess, we've got like, you know, the handheld camera shit and like actors singing on stage so that we can capture it in the moment. And like, no, because the other end of it is like the John M. Chu stuff where it's like all camera work, all slow motion, all like really complex dance scenes. And like, but then that stuff is too music video-y. So no, it's kind of good that we don't have, because I already am kind of hesitant about movie musicals because like you said, they feel too much like stage shows. You know, like the staging. Yeah. If you watch West Side Story, like everyone loves it, but I'm like, it looks like everything is done on stage for a stage. It looks like they tried to find the right space, the right space dynamics, and then just clear everything aside so that they have the right background, kind of like how they bring in backgrounds on stage shows, and then just dance in front of it.
It's not like what I like about La La Land is very little of it feels like a stage show.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of dancing either. There's like there's like 3 big dance numbers maybe, but they use the space really well.
Yeah, but it's like it's a musical designed for film, not on a stage and then you park a camera in front of it. Mm-hmm. And also, it's got, like I said, so many movie musicals just kind of jump the shark of logic, where you're like, wait, what the fuck? And there's never one of those moments in La La Land.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the things I like is, well, it does have that one moment, but it's
Wait,
used...
what one moment?
The one moment where it kind of jumps all the logic is when like he starts playing the song at the end of the movie, and then we flash back to the beginning of the movie and have that very like that moment where it's like everything turned out happy.
Well, but that's like
but then it brings sequence. It back. But importantly, it then brings it back, and we conclude with sort of the bittersweet ending, which is why it works so well. Like that's it's like 5 years later they've gone their separate ways. They come back, but they don't even interact with each other aside from one look, and then they share the song one last time, And it's fanciful, and it breaks reality, and then it brings it back to reality.
Well, exactly. That's why it works. And it's also, like, very clearly separate from the rest of the movie. Like, it's very clearly a dream sequence.
Yeah.
It's kind of, like, I think my favorite part of Singing in the Rain is the Broadway melody sequence, where they're like, what the hell are we going to do for this movie? And Gene Kelly's like, I have an idea. And then it's just like this 20-minute thing of his weird idea for what they should do. And it's completely unlike anything else in the movie, and it's great. So it's like you can kind of give yourself an avenue to be fanciful in that way. Mm-hmm. But it's weird when, like, you know, you have one character having an entire conversation with herself while a bunch of stagehands follow her around just for the sake of blocking. Then she bursts into song, and all the stagehands start dancing because really you just needed them an excuse to be on stage so they could be backup dancers.
Right.
And everyone yells all the time, and nothing makes any sense, and it makes my head hurt. And there's an orchestra that no one can hear, but they can somehow... Or there's an orchestra that everyone can hear, but it's not there in the scene.
It's okay.
And then Fred Astaire plays a guitar by hitting it.
It's okay to mix diegesis, but not like that. Not like that.
Not like that. No, you can't have people applaud for music that's not there.
I mean, again, I like some of that stuff where it's like, this comes out of left field. Like, I'm okay with it to a degree, but I think there's something about the 50s that if you're not doing it, that you're not doing it where you're like winking at the audience and you're like playing it straight, that it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's the case with Funny Face, because again, I haven't seen it, and I have even less interest in watching it now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Nothing in that movie works.
Not even Audrey Hepburn's cheekbones. I don't know. So overall rating. So in overall rating, is this Furiosa like silently screaming as Junkie XL score builds, or is this just mediocre?
It's hilariously bad enough that it's mediocre.
Oh, wow. Just by the skin of its teeth.
Just because it's so freaking funny how stupid it is.
Oh, Funny Face. Ugh, God. Like, I feel like we're going to have like a spectrum of worst movies we've ever seen, and then just we're going to be slotting them in like, it's better than Funny Face. Or stuff like that. My God. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to talk about something I've seen.
Okay.
Did you... I wanted to catch up on some of the Netflix films that were done by directors that I liked, but I hadn't seen yet. And so I stumbled upon The Highwaymen. Are you familiar at all with John Lee Miller's film? I think we've talked about him a couple of times. He did The Rookie with Dennis Quaid, not The Rookie with Clint Eastwood. That was Clint Eastwood who directed
Oh, The Highwaymen. I had no interest in that movie. I'm looking up what else he's done, and
I feel like
I have not seen any of his movies.
Really?
Nor am I really interested in any of like a lot of his movies sound incredibly boring. The Rookie sounds boring.
I figured.
Also, isn't The Rookie that movie where Dennis Quaid breaks his arm and then he can throw 100 miles an hour?
Yes, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, The Blind Side looks boring. Snow White and the Huntsman looks boring.
He didn't do Snow White and the Huntsman, did he?
Oh, he was a writer on it.
Yeah, he didn't direct it.
Saving Mr. Banks looks boring. The
It was
Founder
really good.
looks boring. The Highwaymen looks boring. Like,
pretty good.
here's why The Highwaymen is fucked. Because I know you saw it and I haven't, and your opinion is way more credible than mine because I haven't seen it. However, like there's like a storied tradition in Hollywood of like taking an interesting person or event and then making an entire movie about people who were only very tangentially related to it. It's like, hey, Bonnie and Clyde, that was a great movie, and those are two very interesting real-life people with a really crazy story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What if we made a movie about the two people who shot them? Why? Do they have anything interesting about them other than that they shot Bonnie and Clyde? Nope. Okay.
Fair enough. To be fair, I like John Lee Hancock because I think he is kind of like James Mangold. Like, he's a very solid director. Except all of his movies are probably about between 10 and 20 minutes too long. But he's like a very solid studio guy. He gets in. He doesn't really mess too much with like complicated camera work. Like, his camera work is good. It's not transcendent. His editing is good. It's not transcendent. He's very much like, this is the story and this is what I want to tell. And in every one of his movies, he has some really interesting moments or some interesting features in it that like stick out with me. And for the record, The Rookie is, I really like The Rookie as a baseball movie, but it almost operates like two separate movies. And I'm surprised you haven't seen it because you seem like you'd watch baseball movies.
I don't watch a lot of sports movies because they suck by and large.
Because they're all the same.
Well, a lot of them are just shit. I mean, so one note on sports movies real quick. The only two sports movies I've seen that I actually think are good are Warrior and The Natural. Warrior's good because it's a generic sports movie, but it does everything really, really well. Mm-hmm. And then The Natural is good because it is 2 hours of just unrelenting, grim bleakness where the main character just suffers constantly. And then at the end, he has this amazing triumph, and you're like, holy shit, he did it. Like, all of that, like, the last 2 hours of misery paid off.
Wait, did we watch The Natural with Robert Redford?
Yeah.
Where he pitches, and then Barbara Hershey comes in and pretends to kill him, and then he comes back and he becomes, like, the best hitter in baseball, and then falls for, what's her name, Vicky Vale, and then starts playing like shit, and then gets a baseball bat from a little boy and hits a home run to win the game. That Natural?
That Natural.
You and I watched two very different movies.
What are you talking about, man? Roy Hobbs is like the most talented baseball player in the world. Before his career can even start, some crazy, like, mentally ill woman tries to murder him. He, works like some dead-end job and is barely, manages to salvage his health to the point where he can get back to playing again. He's still really good, but because he's got a bullet in him and permanent organ damage, that constantly holds him back. So, like, anytime he gets close to any success, his wound starts acting up. He ends up going to the hospital, almost dying. The owners of the team that he plays for are crazy and corrupt and are, trying to pay him off to throw the game. And like the responsible thing to do is take the money and throw their big playoff game because he secretly has a son that he's abandoned with this other woman. Mm-hmm. And in the book, he actually does throw the game and take the money so he can support his family. Mm-hmm. But they kind of twist the logic of it so you can have the happy ending.
Huh.
But yeah, it's like, I think the reason why the ending of The Natural is so memorable, at least for me, is because most of the movie is so miserable.
I haven't seen The Natural in a long time, but I did not get that same thing out of it that you did.
Like, it's basically like this guy is destined for greatness and is just cut down at every opportunity, and then at the end finally has some measure of success.
Huh. And then he goes and marries Glenn Close.
Yep. Well, because, she's the mother of his child who's like 20.
Yeah. The next Natural. That's funny. I guess maybe I should go back and rewatch it because there's a lot of that I don't remember happening. I mean, I remember it being depressing and like in that sort of like 1970s way, even though was the movie like the early 80s. But like it had like a very 1970s feel and like, I know I've said it a lot in a mocking way, but like sort of like gritty way and like where it was like everything was dirty and shit. Mm-hmm. And But like overall, I was like, well, it's not that bad because Robert Redford, and maybe it's just because Robert Redford always looks like the kind of guy who can keep his chin up even in the worst of situations. But I was always like, yeah, the situations never seem that bad until he goes on that really bad hitting streak when he starts dating Kim Basinger. But like, I overall, I mean, I remember it being really depressing in the beginning, being okay except for the coach who was like losing his fucking head in most of the middle of the movie, and then at the end finding a lot of satisfaction and catharsis as he hits that final home run. I did forget about the bullet like basically ruining his career after one season. I did forget about that.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like
it's another bittersweet thing.
Yeah, the movie is very bittersweet because it's like, you know, it's about all this. The man who had all of the potential in the world lost almost all of it, but then manages to reclaim just a little bit through just grit and force of will.
And the Savoy Special.
And the Savoy Special.
That's the best. I mean, there's a lot of other things in it that I like. Like his father dies when he's really young, and a lightning bolt hits a tree, and he makes a bat out of that. Yeah. Out of that.
Well, so
thing.
Again,
the mythological implications of it all is really.
The book is based on the legend of King Arthur as well. So like the Wonder Boy bat is supposed to be Excalibur. You know, he inherits a lot of ability, but like King Arthur, kind of fails in a lot of ways to bring it to bear. He's tripped up by, you know, an evil, seductive woman, Morgan Le Fay, who's the Kim Basinger character. And eventually, you know, kind of, like I said, in the book, he breaks the bat, he breaks Excalibur, which is like, you know, having it thrown back into the lake, and he kind of has to accept the consequences of his hubris and his bad choices. He throws the game, takes the money, and uses it to help support his son, who he's abandoned.
So, but you think the movie, do you think it's a better adaptation? Like, do you think the movie transcends the qualities of the book, or do you think the book's better?
I like the movie just because the ending is so cathartic. It's hard to imagine it any other way.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Rookie.
It's 70 depressing, but not that 70s depressing.
Exactly. So yeah, The Rookie.
Well, The Rookie's weird because like the first half of the movie, it's him as a coach who's kind of like, he wanted to be a pro, but he broke his arm when he was trying out, and he was hitting the 80s, or he was hitting 80 miles an hour, and then he goes and coaches his team, but he's throwing batting practice, and he starts like really like throwing harder and harder because the kids are like, if we're facing real pitchers, we got to face real speed. And they realize that he can throw hard, and so they give him a challenge. Like, if we win districts, you try out for the majors. So they win he coaches them up. They win districts. There's some fun shenanigans that happen that involve like the field of play and stuff. And then he goes and he tries out for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And the second half of the movie is basically sort of like the hard life you lead as like as a minor league baseball player, because he gets drafted, but he's passed over in favor of younger guys, and so he has to play as a minor league player, and he's writing to his wife and his kids, and he gets homesick, and then the Rays bring him up to, like, they bring him and a catcher up to the majors, and he pitches in a game and he strikes out the guy or whatever. And like then it ends like most movies with after pitching like 1 or 3 seasons with the Tampa Bay Rays, he came back home because of homesickness or whatever. So it's a pretty cliche story. It's done really well, and they have the super fast pitching sound effect whenever old ass Dennis Quaid chucks the ball. But also I'm also partial to it because it's a left-handed pitcher, and I'm like, yeah, lefties. So it's like it's hard throwing lefties and stuff. I enjoyed it. Most of his movies, as you can tell, are biopics, and so there's he plays fast and loose with that. But like, I did enjoy The Highwaymen. Yes, I've seen Bonnie and Clyde. It's almost like the cop side of Bonnie and Clyde, where it's like no one else can catch them, so they have to bring the Texas Rangers out of retirement for one last ride, kind of thing. But they have this one extended scene where Kevin Costner goes to a gun shop and he's just like looking at the guns and he's like, that one up there, what's that? And the guy brings it down and he tests it and he's like, all right, I'm gonna need 2 of these, and he goes through basically a shopping list of all the guns he needs, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. That's the scene that's gonna stick out with me. But like I said, John Lee Hancock makes he takes content that might be sort of blah or boring, and he's able to make it more interesting. So I'm kind of a fan of his, so I was excited to see it. It's probably one of the better Netflix movies, which is not saying much, but especially released in the last 3 years. But it was fun. Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner have some fun together. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, I should say.
You're not really selling me on John Lee Hancock or anything that he's made.
Well, you already don't seem the other thing is I think the only movie of his that you might find a little bit interesting is The Founder, because you're gonna go. I think if you wanted to see The Highwayman, you're already going in sort of not interested in seeing it, because in your mind this content has already been covered. We've already covered Bonnie and Clyde. They went out, they partied, they robbed a bunch of people, they killed a bunch of cops, and then on the side of the road they mistook a broken down car and were gunned down by a bunch of people, basically in cold blood. They just killed everyone.
Yep.
The way that this movie handles it is that the 2 main characters are kind of somewhat hesitant. One of them has the complex of I've killed so many people and I always see all of the people I've killed. And then the other one is Kevin Costner, Kevin Costner's character is just so when it comes down to having to do the job, he's so by the book, straight laced. What do we have to do? We have to stop these people no matter what. Okay. And so they kind of recount this story about how Woody Harrelson, of course, does it because Woody Harrelson's a good actor and he's a good storyteller for the most part. And so he kind of tells the story about how they were in a battle with some Comanches or whatever, and
Comanches? What year is this?
Comanches or Mexicans, I don't know, but robbers that were holed up and they had some hostage, or they were holed up in this one hideout.
I was how close was Bonnie and Clyde to the Alamo?
Well, if this were the Alamo, then Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner would be dead because they lost the Alamo. But he tells this story about how these other people who were in charge were oh, well, maybe we need to do it safely like this. We need to wait for them to shoot before we shoot them. And Kevin Costner came in and he's they've killed X amount of us already. Here's the new plan. We say it once. If they don't respond, we go in shooting everyone. And that's just how we have to do it. And so then at the end of the movie, he's when it comes to Bonnie and Clyde, he's look, Bonnie and Clyde have gone a route. They don't just kill officers. They kill them and then they shoot them in the face so that no one can recognize them. And then they boast about it. There's no going around it. There's this one guy who was in love with Bonnie. He's look, the girl that you fell in love with, she's gone. So you just have to go and just shoot her. And I think he ends up shooting her right through the eye or something. So it's these 2 kind of no nonsense men, and sort of the strategic way that they figure out how to lure Bonnie and Clyde into a trap where they can go and gun them down. And I kind of like the efficiency and the ruthlessness of it. I like the fact that it kind of paints the stage, and these 2 characters who are so often romanticized in Bonnie and Clyde, I like the fact that this movie kind of paints them as well, think about it from this context. Do you really think that they're on the level of movie stars if they're going around killing regular people, robbing other businesses? They're causing terror, even though most of the terror was for the police officers at the time. Do you really think this is a good idea? But of course it kind of falters in that same sense of hey man, these police officers' lives are being put in danger by these people, and the Texas Rangers were disbanded, but we need to bring them back. But no one wants to bring the Texas Rangers back because they're a bunch of cowboys that just shoot everyone. So it's kind of but but like it's solid enough, and when it starts going, like the storytelling itself is very efficient. So, but the only one of his movies I think you'd really enjoy is The Founder, just because it's the life of Ray Kroc is interesting. It's got a good cast with a lot of good cameos, and it really does a good job of painting both like this is a guy who really wanted to find that one thing to succeed, but these are all of the people that he destroyed along the way. And so it's told in a very efficient way. Michael Keaton is really fantastic in it as sort of like, Ray Kroc, the traveling salesman, and then like the media empire. Like you can see him slowly turning more and more, devious and evil and things like that. So The Founder's interesting. It's got a lot of good performances. I'm going to move on to another one. Have you seen Greenzone? Not Green Day. Have you seen Green Day? Have you seen Greenzone with Matt Damon?
No. This is
okay.
That one Paul Greengrass movie that no one saw, right?
Yeah. The one about weapons of mass destruction.
I don't even know what it's about, but I know that there was a Paul Greengrass movie with Matt Damon. It came and went. No one saw it or ever talked about it again. Until now, Matt, you've seen it and are ready to talk about it.
If you watched the Bourne movies and were sort of like ho-hum on them, like I kind of like the style, but it's a little hard to follow everything. Like, I felt kind of off-put by the sort of like the gritty, realistic style kind of got in the way. I liked Greenzone a lot. It still had a lot of the sort of Paul Greengrass touches, but because it was more of like a real story about a real conflict and event, I think it works a lot better. And I like the way that it paints all sides of the equation. Whereas like it's the story of Matt Damon's a soldier, but he's a really good soldier. He's a really accomplished soldier. And he is tasked with investigating and clearing out sites where they believe weapons of mass destruction are. And he feels like something strange is going on. He has an interaction with one of the Iraqi locals who like came out, and he was just like, look, this is a bad guy. This is what the bad guy's doing. And Matt Damon's like, why are you helping us? And he's like, because I want to make where I live better. I want you guys out because you guys have come in here and you've created a bunch of chaos for us, and now we can't go back to our normal way. So Matt Damon investigates it, finds out that there's nothing there, and then gets recruited by one of the CIA officers who's played by Brendan Gleeson to do some sort of off-the-books investigating as to what's going on with it. And I really liked it. I thought it was really cool and did a good job, unlike a lot of movies, of sort of presenting both the American side and the Iraqi side of just like people on the ground level and what they would have to deal with in sort of like an invasion of this sort. It's a shame that it kind of came and went without much recourse or much talk about. I think it came in a year. It was a pretty good year for movies, but like I recommend it. I think it's a high witness. I think that it's definitely worth seeing, even if it gets a little heavy-handed with some of its commentary. If you couldn't tell.
Social commentary.
Yeah, social commentary about the WMD investigation. But they have what's his name is in it. Greg Kinnear is in it as sort of like the like one of the military leader guys who's just dressed in a suit and stuff, and he's the one who's like, oh, good job, Matt Damon, you're doing a great job, like looking at those terrorist sites and finding them. And so there's a little bit of that interplay of like, oh, well, who's he going to go with? Like the politician who can help his career go forward, or Brendan Gleeson, who everyone hates because he's Brendan Gleeson. So I like, if you get a chance to see it, I would recommend seeing it and then letting me know, because there's what's his name? Jason Isaacs, the guy who plays as Lucius Malfoy. He's in it. He plays the bad guy, so you got to hear him with an American accent. So.
Oh, nice. Who's what's that one? There's like some radio show where Jason Isaacs is always a guest. I can't remember what it is. Yeah. It's like they'll have a segment called like "What's Happening with Jason Isaacs," and then
are you serious?
Show up. Yeah.
That sounds like the best thing ever. as like a half-hearted Jason Isaacs fan, what is this?
I want to say it's like one of Mark Kermode's shows, but don't quote me on that.
I won't.
But yeah, remember there's some thing where it's like, what's happening with Jason Isaacs?
What's happening with? Let's see here. Well, because he's famous for playing a captain on Star Trek Discovery, of course. Well,
oh god. Well, does anyone watch?
Second.
That did take me a second. Does anyone actually watch anything on the CBS On Demand platform?
Oh man. Well, I don't think they have The Big Bang Theory, which would basically be the only reason people would get it. I'm pretty sure. No, I think there's
people watch The Big Bang Theory.
Dude, a lot of people watch The Big Bang Theory. A lot of people were crushed by the fact that it was ending. I personally could not care less. I thought it would have ended like 10 years ago. But Chuck Lorre has this ability to like make even the dumbest ideas last for 10, 20 years. I mean, just look at 2.5 Men.
Okay,
Dharma
so
and Greg.
It's the Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo's film review on BBC Radio 5. Mark Kermode and Jason Isaacs went to like high school together or something. Mm-hmm. So Jason Isaacs is a very frequent guest on that show. And apparently they shout him out constantly. So that's that whole thing.
Dude, that's cool. Like, I feel like Jason Isaacs is one of those actors that I like him in whatever he's in, even though what he's in is never always the best stuff. Star Trek Discovery, for example. But,
yeah.
Like, but he's just sort of never gotten enough. Like, he's a character actor. Like, he could have been more, but he kind of was a character actor and has just kind of stayed a character actor, which isn't a bad thing to be. I mean, he's incredibly successful. He's a go-to guy if you need a villain. But, like, for example, he was in the film Scoob as the villain, Dick Dastardly. So he's still getting work. But
okay.
But yeah, I recommend Greenzone if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
You might not like it as much as I did, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Well, also, one last note. I liked Matt Damon in it because normally when you get Matt Damon, you kind of get sort of like cocky, arrogant Matt Damon. There was a certain amount of efficiency about Matt Damon's performance that I really liked in the movie.
You've used the word efficient a lot in this podcast so far.
I know, today I certainly have. But it's true. Like, it reminded me why Matt Damon used to be seen as a good actor, as opposed to now where he's basically just Matt Damon, but he puts on a fake accent for whatever role he's in.
Yeah. I mean, that was still during the time when he was really good.
Yeah.
And was consistently turning in good performances.
Yeah. So, it was before Elysium. So I feel like Elysium is where he jumped the shark.
I barely remember Elysium.
Count your blessings. Elysium was one of those movies that it should have been like the best thing ever, and like at least for nerdy guys like me,
it could have been awesome. Yeah,
but it ended up being kind of equivalent to a steaming pile of shit by the end. Like, yeah, no, somewhat doughy Matt Damon.
What's the name of that director who makes all those crappy movies in South Africa?
Neill Blomkamp.
Neill Blomkamp, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He also has Neill Blomkamp. I think like District 9 was a really fun movie. I liked it a lot. But yeah, everything after where he either has ninja in the movie or tried to get ninja in the movie and it didn't work out, so he had to put Matt Damon in it. All of that stuff is terrible. And I don't know why he's always trying to throw the die antword people in movies, because they're not entertaining. But I guess it's a South Africa thing. I don't know.
The what?
There's a South African music duo called Die Antwoord or Die Antwoord or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's a man and a woman. The woman is Yolandi Visser and the man is Ninja. They're the two, like, they're both in Chappie. But I think the main character in Elysium was supposed to be played by Ninja, and when he couldn't get him, he got like Matt Damon or something.
I thought the main character was supposed to be played by Eminem.
Oh no, I think it was supposed to be Ninja, and then when he couldn't get Ninja, it was supposed to be Eminem, and then when he couldn't get Eminem, it was supposed to be Matt Damon.
Yeah, I mean,
or ended up being Matt Damon.
Like, to Matt Damon's credit, like I read a little bit about what he did, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, my problem is Matt Damon still looks like a dumpy kind of like dad bod in that movie, and he has to have his shirt off a couple times. But like, to Matt Damon's credit, he like put on a bunch of muscle weight. Like, he trained to try and look as good as he could, so that when he got the, you know, the cybernetic skeletons from what's it called, from Death Stranding on him, like, he looked as good as he could. But like Elysium should have been awesome. But
it should have. It looked really cool in the trailers and shit. But
like when he shoots the freaking rocket-propelled grenade in slow motion and it blows up the robot, you're like, yeah, that's cool. Or when like Charlton Copley starts killing people with a samurai sword, it's like, yeah, that's cool.
When Charlton Copley gets his face blown off and then reconstructed, yeah, that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. But then, like, yeah, a lot of the rest of the movie's kind of crap.
Yeah, I mean, when you're like very poorly, like your overly obvious metaphor in the sky, the only defense mechanism is one guy with a bazooka. Like, maybe you didn't think about how you were going to do this movie as well as you probably should have.
Yeah, well, it's... Boy, Neill Blomkamp is definitely a fan of really heavy-handed, in-your-face metaphors and social commentary.
Yes, thank you, yes.
Like...
Yeah.
Him and Hideo Kojima should like work together on something, because whatever they make would be the equivalent of like carving social commentary into a sledgehammer and then hitting someone in the face with it. That said, I was talking with a friend about Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, the other day. And it's like, fuck, man, that game was so far ahead of its time in terms of what it was about. Like, basically everything it said about the internet and about, like, pop culture and about society pretty much came true.
Yeah. Lolly Lule Lo, my friends.
Lolly Lule Lo.
The other thing is, like, I was, like, another movie I watched because it's become comfort food for me is, like, Mad Max Fury Road is surprisingly, like... It's one of those movies where you can watch it now and see all of the issues of society in one movie. But saying that, like, oh man, it's like it predicted, you know, all of the problems we have with society, like to the point where like Trump looks like Immortan Joe right now. But like Mad Max Fury Road really did call a lot of stuff, but it's not really because it called it because it was predicting the future. It called all of this shit because it used the solid foundation of everything that we've experienced prior and everything that we're going to see going forward. Like, it's going to be one of those movies that, like, you know, 20 years from now when we have our next huge, you know, heaven forbid we can last another 20 years, but 20 years from now when we get our next huge global event, you're going to watch Mad Max Fury Road and be like, oh my god, it's like he predicted the future. And it's like, no, it's just this movie's always gonna work. Like, you could have watched it in the 60s if it existed, and like it would be
make sense
bitingly real. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that another freaking amazing thing about that movie, if there weren't enough superlatives. I mean, that's all I really have to talk about. If you want to, we can get into some Hollywood news.
Well, the last movie I watched during this
go ahead. I'm
period,
sorry. Yes.
Was Bliss. It's a horror movie by Joe Begos, who I only know who that is or what this movie is because Austin has mentioned it a few times. And it's fine. It's got some cool camera work and some cool like gory sequences, but story-wise, it's not super interesting. None of the characters are really that intriguing, and like one thing that kind of kept pulling me out of the movie is like the main characters swear so much. Like I've never met I've heard people who swear a lot. Not even they swear as much as these people do. Like the dialogue has like just fuck or shit or dick every other word. So it's like it takes twice as long to say one sentence because every other word is fuck.
It's not one of those good like Scorsese improv where they say fuck every other line. It's like bad Scorsese improv where he says fuck 15 times in one line. That sort of thing.
Yes. It's like, I went to the store is 5 words. The way these characters talk, it would take them 10 words to say that because 5 of those words would be fuck, shit, bitch, cunt, dick. And it's just like, God, is this the whole movie? And it is the whole movie. Everyone talks like that for the entire movie.
Oh, jeez.
But like all of the horror-ish stuff is neat. It's just like all of the movie, or all of the kind of, like the base of it, just the characters and story that you need to support everything else isn't that good. It's like a sandwich with really crappy bread and really crappy vegetables, but it's got an amazing sauce and like really nice, deli meat on it or something. Like the base is terrible, but everything they put on it is pretty cool.
So, like, the visuals, the horror, the themes, everything's good, but, like, the main components are just bad? Is that, like...
Yeah, like, the visuals, the horror, like, kill sequences, the gore, the style, the more stylized camera work and sound work is all really cool, but, like, the basics that are not specific to any movie, just, story, characters, dialogue, pacing, not good.
Oh man, that's really disappointing.
Yeah.
So he should just stay doing shorts. Where none
that's
of that
the thing. Yeah,
matters.
I feel like this movie would. It's got like enough cool ideas for an amazing short, but instead it's like an hour and a half of mediocrity with some really cool ideas thrown in there.
Well, was it made? I'm guessing it was made for like a pretty low budget.
Oh yeah, very low budget. Really stretches it. I mean, it's crazy the stuff you can do these days with not a lot of money. Just because it's not very expensive to get a very nice camera.
Right.
There's a lot of manipulation you can do just in Adobe. And thinking outside the box.
Yeah. I mean, you can pay $1,000 and get everything you need for like post-production. Get a good computer, $1,000. Like Resolve's free to color correct. You can do a lot of stuff in After Effects. The thing that always gets me is like, well, and then I guess the other thing is like practical effects have become so cheap because there's so many people who know how to do like good enough, and then you can use After Effects to complement it and make it look better. Yep. So, and there's a bunch of nerds out there who love practical effects. Like, I'm one of them. I like practical effects, but like there's a bunch of people who have been doing that who are like, oh yeah, I can do it and I can do it for cheap and we can make it look kind of good. And even if it doesn't look good, it's not like digital technology where it looks like, where practical effects, if it looks fake, it kind of adds to the value in some ways. So like you can make certain practical effects not look realistic but look grosser. Like I'm sure, as a callback, like Stuart Gordon was really good at making things that weren't completely realistic looking, but still made it look disgusting. John
Yes,
Carpenter's another one. And like that's a style, it's an aesthetic. So yeah, I mean, that's cool. Is it worth watching though? Is Bliss worth me going in and spending 80 minutes of my life in a dark room thinking about it?
I mean, if you like violent horror movies, it's worth it. If you don't, it might be a waste of time. I don't know. It's hard to say. Horror movies are weird because it's like a lot of people don't like horror movies. A lot of people like the idea of horror movies, but then they watch them and they're like, I not like,
like It.
Like It.
Or I should say It Chapter 2. Which I actually enjoy. I feel like everyone has their own definition of a horror movie.
Well, it's like horror movies. The other thing with horror movies is they don't age well in terms of like scare quality. Like it's hard to find a horror movie from the 70s that's scary now. But there's, horror movies from the 70s that are still fun or still interesting or they're still like good movies.
Yeah.
Or they're still like exciting in some way, even if they're not scary.
Yeah, I mean, I still like The Exorcist a lot, even though most of it is more sort of like existential dread than like actual like I'm scared.
Yeah, well, it's like I'm trying to think of a good example, like Suspiria, not scary at all, but it's still got like it's still a good movie. Like it's still a solid witness, just because it's it's like a fun and interesting and reasonably exciting slasher.
Yeah, I mean, I would say The Thing kind of is. Maybe it's just because it's disgusting, as opposed to like
Thing is
scary. But
The Thing is so viscerally disgusting, and that it is scary.
Yeah,
Like The Thing has a weird quality to it, where a lot of the effects are in that special zone where they're almost more disturbing because they don't look real. Like it's so unnatural that it just gets under your skin in this weird way.
Yeah.
Like The Thing, I think, works now just as well as it worked in the 1980s, because I think a lot of what makes it unsettling is the same.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's also it is like a lot of the plot itself is very tense. So it's like, because it's a good movie, and you'll feel the same amount of tension that you would in any good thriller or mystery. And then on top of that, you have just this insanely disgusting gore, which like I think would get under audiences' skins for the same reasons it got under audiences' skins 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about the digital uncanny valley, and no one really talks about the stop motion uncanny valley and how that's even like the digital uncanny valley. When that happens, it's kind of laughable, but when you get the stop motion uncanny valley, like all of a sudden
it's really creepy,
disturbing. Yeah.
The practical uncanny valley is really creepy. Which I think that's part of why The Thing is so enduring, is because all that stuff still holds true and holds up pretty well. But yeah, as far as Bliss goes, if you like horror movies, watch it. If you don't like horror movies, don't bother.
Well, like I want to watch VFW, but like just looking at what Bliss is about kind of makes this at the same tone as like I don't really want to watch that one Gaspar Noé film where everyone's like dancing to death. Like, I don't know if this
Climax?
is really Climax.
Yeah, I mean, Climax is interesting, and that's it.
I was gonna say, I feel like Gaspar Noé is just like, he's a filmmaker that I'm just like afraid to watch his movies more than like, oh yeah, I should search them out. I'm just like kind of like
I mean, the couple Gaspar Noé movies I've seen are all interesting, and none of them are good or like there's not much about his movies that I've seen anyway that I really liked. It's just like, oh, that's a neat idea.
He's like a high concept, well-paid Neil Breen.
What?
I've been watching a lot of Best of the Worst. So he was the first one I could think of.
I mean, like Irreversible is not a good movie. I wouldn't recommend anyone watch it, but it's got like some interesting ideas from a technical perspective.
Yeah.
Gaspar Noé is probably most famous for his disembodied camera work, where the camera just floats through everything like a ghost and does these really acrobatic maneuvers. And it's kind of alienating, but it helps sell the vibe of a lot of his movies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, you could go your entire life without ever seeing Irreversible or Climax and be just fine.
Or Enter the Void, or Love, or...
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just kind of gloss over Gaspar Noé.
Because yeah, it's just like his movies are, I mean, the ones I've seen, they're good. Or no, they're not good, but they're interesting.
Yeah, they're well... He's technically proficient, but
he's technically proficient and has some cool ideas, but the movies themselves are not like really much to write home about.
So he's like a modern day fucked up Jean-Luc Godard.
Yeah, he is. He's the
French.
Jean-Luc Godard of fucked up movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say I said he is French, but he's Argentinian. Based in Paris, France. So he's the Argentinian modern version of Jean-Luc Godard. Man. Well, that was Bliss. Yeah, I don't know. I might skip it. It just the concept doesn't seem interesting. And if you had given it sort of like a glowing review of like everything, like the camera work was amazing, the editing's amazing, like. There's a point to watching it and you will enjoy the point, but like the synopsis on Wikipedia is described as a vampire film. It concerns an artist named Desi who descends into madness after taking a hallucinogenic drug to overcome a creative block. It basically sounds like a college thesis film.
Well, that's the thing. Drug movies in general are not very interesting as a concept.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie does kind of a nice twist on it, where it's like, she takes this hallucinogenic drug, and you're like, oh, what is real, blah, 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 blah. But, like, the hallucinogenic drug, the movie kind of hints at that it's like vampire blood. Mm-hmm. And by taking it, she turns into a vampire. And they kind of more or less confirm it at the end, because... she dies a Nosferatu death. She is so... She does! She's painting her painting, and she gets so into it that she doesn't realize the sun is coming up. The sun comes up, hits her, and she explodes.
This episode brought to you by Efficiency and Nosferatu.
I know. One of the really cool things about the movie is anytime one of the vampires gets killed, they get stabbed through the heart, they melt. And the way they melt is like, it's very Panos Cosmatos-ish. And like, that's pretty cool. But yeah, most people can skip Bliss.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I mean, Regal... all its theaters are shutting down, and every interesting movie for the rest of the year is getting pushed into 2021.
If it's not being released on a streaming service.
Every interesting movie is getting pushed into 2021.
I go back and forth on this, because like I still give Pixar the benefit of the doubt, especially like Pete Docter, but like, well, no, not every movie. Not every interesting movie, because Mank is coming out in theaters and then released on digital December 4th.
I thought Mank was a Netflix movie.
It is.
Well, fuck the distributor is a streaming service.
but But
it was always going to be on streaming.
But it's David Fincher, and it's going to be released in theaters in November to contend for an Academy Award.
But what I mean is like every interesting non-streaming movie, you know, James Bond and all that jazz. Not the movie All That Jazz, but the phrase.
I mean, if they re-release that in theaters, you know, country would go wild. Who doesn't want to see what's his name's super self-indulgent movie? Bob Fosse. He has a name. He's famous. I know who he is. I know Bob Fosse. He's an asshole. Anyway, but yeah.
You mean the guy Michael Jackson stole all his dance moves from?
And Beyonce. And like a bunch of people.
A bunch of people, really.
Well, like so you're obvious. For those who don't know, Gabe is a fan of baseball.
Yes.
Damn Yankees. Bob Fosse was the original choreographer for it, which is probably why there's a bunch of like sexual innuendo in the musical. So thanks, Bob Fosse. Thanks. But yeah, how did we get? Yeah, a lot of the movies that are coming out that would have been interesting to watch coming out now, like Wonder Woman 1984, James Bond, Tenet already came and went. I mean, like, what other movies were pushed that are interesting? Because like I'm like mild at best interested in Black Widow. I wouldn't say it's, you know, the most interesting thing.
I wrote a piece for the website called "Will Dune 2020 Be Any Good?" It's now Dune 2021, so
that's kind of a shame. I think the marketing people were like super pissed as soon as like, we have to move it to 2021, but we had such a good thing going with Dune 2020. They didn't. But yeah, Dune. Well, it's also Dune Part 1, right? Because it's a
Dune
two-part.
Part 1.
Yeah.
You can tell it's a two-parter because the main villain isn't in the movie.
Wait, I thought the main villain was Stellan Skarsgård.
Well, sort of. In Dune, the book, there's two main villains. There's Baron Harkonnen, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård, and there's his nephew, Feyd-Rautha. Feyd-Rautha's not in this Dune Part 1.
That's right, yeah.
Which is like, why? Like, why is he not in it? Why are they saving him for Part 2? Like, it's so fucking stupid. Why would you save your... Because it's like everyone knows who Feyd-Rautha is because he was played by Sting in the David Lynch Dune movie. So everyone's like, wait, where's the guy played by Sting? And it's like, he's not in this because they're doing that stupid Justice League bullshit where instead of having Darkseid be the bad guy, we'll have someone you've never heard of be the bad guy so we can tease Darkseid later in a movie that will now never be made. So it's like this, you know, the trailers for this Dune Part 1 are full of... they're full of Dave Bautista, who plays Feyd-Rautha's brother. And in the book, he's a very, very minor character. So it's like, why is Dave Bautista all over the trailers when his character is not really that important? And then I'm like, wait a minute. Oh no, they're doing the Steppenwolf thing. He's going to be the main bad guy of Part 1. And then they'll like have some post-credit scene with Sting or whatever. And, you know, then he'll be the bad guy in Part 2. And I'm like, that's fucking stupid. You know, it's just, I hate that trend of like, we're going to adapt an established property, break it up into multiple parts, and have the first part, and for the first part, the main villain will be some really uninteresting character because we want to build up to the interesting character. But the problem is, it's like, you know, all those stupid writing gurus will say, you know, the most important, you know, page in your novel is going to be the first page because you got to grab the reader's attention. Mm-hmm. Same fucking thing goes for these movies, man. Your first installment has to be attention grabbing. You know what's not attention grabbing? Steppenwolf. So yeah.
Well, but like I would contend that the Baron is like a more than adequate or even better villain. Like villain, because I remember the Baron clearly. I remember him being a fat fuck on a floating thing. I don't remember if that's true, but
he is. He's a fat guy who floats around.
So that's visually a great thing, and he has an effect on the book. Like, again, spoilers for Dune if you've never read it. You should, even with some of its sort of like own issues that I always forget about what they are. But like, the first half of the book is basically the Baron destroying Paul's family and his way of life and forcing him into basically into hiding, and then he has to join with the locals and go native. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a good synopsis for the first half.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, but when does his nephew come into play? Like, he comes into play like halfway through the book, right? Or like maybe he's introduced early on, and then
he's introduced maybe a third of the way through, but then shows up on the scene about halfway. Or he comes to bear on the plot more heavily about halfway through, because the Baron's entire plan is get rid of Paul's family, install his older son as the ruler of Arrakis. His older son is
a pussy.
Well, no, his older son is like this violent moron.
Okay.
So his rule will be very like violent and horrifying, and people will hate him. Mm-hmm. So then he'll come in, depose not his older son, older nephew. He'll depose his older nephew and install his younger nephew, Feyd-Rautha, and Feyd-Rautha will be greeted as like a hero.
Mm-hmm. But then because
Paul and his army of like worm-riding desert people fuck their plans up, you know.
Oh, I was gonna say Paul and his army of worm-riding desert people fuck. I was like, yeah.
I mean, they do that too.
They do. Oh man, Dune's awesome. I feel bad because like there are parts of the ending that I just kind of don't quite remember, and I don't know if I can go back and reread all that Dune by the time Dune 2021 comes out. Because I think I read it sometime last year.
Oh wow, you read it a lot more recently than I did.
Yeah. I read it in a lot of smaller parts, and I found it interesting. But I also had my own internal problems tracking what was going on in the plot. So that's why a plot summary by you is incredibly helpful, even if it's peppered with inaccuracies. Which
there may be some inaccuracies in there, but I mean, because I read it pretty quickly because I really liked it. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a very difficult book to put down.
Yeah. It's one of the foundations of science fiction and fantasy in current American trends, like the Duke or the Baron being a villain, but wanting to install, and I guess that has more in common with Arthurian myth, but like the Duke putting a puppet for him to control is something that seems like it's in every fantasy novel now, or anything that has an empire in it. It's always like, oh, there's this guy who's scheming to put a puppet so that he can control everything, and then it doesn't come true, and so then the final conflict is actually like it occurs with the two bad guys fighting, and then the main character comes in and he fights him as well. Like that's something that's like I read another book around the same time I had read Dune where that was a thing. So that's why every time I'm like, he's a fat guy who's on a hovercraft, because there was another book I read around the same time that the main character was a very good swordsman who had gotten fat in his position on Parliament, and like his direct actions were causing destruction of the world, but he has to team up with the good guys at one point, but he's still a bad guy, and this happens and that happens. And that book series ended up being incredibly lackluster. And
wait, what book series is this?
It was I don't know what the name of the series itself is called, but it's called, the first book's Across the Face of the World. The second book is In the Earth Abides a Flame, and the third book is the Right Hand of God or something like that.
Oh, and okay. I don't know what this is.
It was a New Zealand author who had a career as a geologist. So all of the description of sort of the mechanics of like where the streams are, how the weather works, like all of the types of trees, like the world building in that sense was very dense. But like it was one of those books where it's like it relied on a lot of bad fantasy tropes. Even though the general like storyline through the first book was pretty good, like by the end of the last book, here's what I mean by like fantasy tropes. Like the main female character, all she really does is fall in love with the villain who's disguised as someone else. Then the villain tortures her so that she's like disfigured and gross. She does something to allow the main character to summon his brother who has become a god to kill the main bad guy. And then the deformed, deranged woman goes to see the main character who has now become the king of the land to like ask forgiveness, but she's afraid he's going to turn her away, and he accepts her. And like, I was just kind of like, really? You went with you went with that? You went with like, because she could have been an interesting character who had agency and wasn't just another, you know, lackluster female character written by a male author type thing. But it like just saying that like the main character's half brother becomes a god that basically defeats the main villain, like that kind of tells you everything you need to know about how the path of this book series went.
Okay.
So,
also,
go ahead.
It's just interesting because it made me think of you know Neal Adams,
the comic artist.
The comic artist, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know his whole geology thing?
No. Is he a big?
Neal Adams is a believer in the hollow earth theory. He believes that the earth is hollow and filled with like dinosaurs and shit.
What?
Yes, this is 100% true. Neal Adams, the artist, the comic book artist, is a hollow earther. And while he's mostly known for drawing comic books, he also, you know, took a stab at writing some comic books as well. So apparently he wrote a comic book called Batman Odyssey, where Batman travels to the center of the earth and fights dinosaurs.
What?
And I heard it's terrible. It's just when you're telling me about this fantasy writer who is a geologist or whatever, I just immediately started thinking of Neal Adams.
Why? Like, what's with everyone wanting Batman, a normal guy with a bunch of tech, to like do ridiculous fantasy stuff? Like,
I don't know.
Also,
Hollow Earth theory.
like Hollow Earth theory. Like, did he? Is that the reason why the Savage Land is the Savage Land in X-Men? But he was an artist at the time. Like, he must have read a lot of Stan Lee comic books and thought Stan Lee was like this amazing like philosopher or something, or like an amazing prophet. Because that sounds like the Savage Land.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Wasn't the Savage Land like an island or something?
The Savage Land is like, I think it's in Antarctica. And it's a section of land that after you get past a bunch of like sub-zero climate icebergs and mountains is a land of dinosaurs and like guys in thongs.
Okay.
And women and chicks in thongs. And like there was an extended period when Jim Lee was drawing X-Men where like Rogue, like superpowered Rogue, was just like chilling in the Savage Land, flying around and killing things in like a scantily clad outfit. So yeah, because you know, like if you grew up
that's
with
how
the
comic
X-Men,
books are.
Yeah, I mean, well, because when I grew up with X-Men as an animated show, all of the women except for like Jean Grey looked like ass. But then you go back and you look at like what Jim Lee was doing, and you're like, why are all of the women super hot? I guess that makes sense now why they're so prominent in the animated show. But I digress. Like Jim Lee, one of the most influential comic book artists, I think, especially in the 90s. Although he was probably heavily inspired by Neal Adams too, because Neal Adams was one of the most influential comic book artists of all time, especially in the late 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah.
And you know, when you have that much power go to your head, of course you're going to start thinking of crazy theories like that you would be able to write.
Well, I think he's always been a Hollow Earth advocate. It's just when he finally got a chance to write something, he's like, "Ooh, I can write about the Hollow Earth."
Oh my god. Why?
I don't know.
What's worse, flat Earth or Hollow Earth?
That's what I was thinking. Like, I feel like the Hollow Earthers and the Flat Earthers need to fight or something.
For control of the wrong Earth theory.
Like, yeah, whose theory about the Earth is more ridiculous?
They both assemble armies that, like, it's like the Battle of the Five Armies, but it's just like a bunch of people who believe in conspiracy theories lining up.
Well, but it's like, Flat Earth isn't even a conspiracy theory. It's like it's like some New Age mystical bullshit.
Is it still believed in? Like, is there a big culture around it? I would think a lot of them would have migrated to something else or died.
Well, they've all migrated to, like, QAnon now. But
if Trump sneezes 3 times in a broadcast, confirmation that Hollow Earth exists. It's the sign we're all looking for.
Well, the Flat Earth, I don't know where the Hollow Earth stuff comes from. I know Flat Earth comes from, like, Victorian evangelical stuff.
Like, if you have to couch... And I would know, as I always couch all of my opinions in a bunch of, like, what's it called? Like,
disclaimers?
Yeah. Like, if you have to couch every single thing you say about why your theory is true with a bunch of disclaimers, like, maybe think about something else. Maybe think about a different theory. From one disclaimer-laden person to the rest of the conspiracy theorists out there.
I don't know. The other thing, it's like, why Flat Earth? You know,
why is that the hill you want to die on? That's not really a hill.
Like,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I understand, like, some of the Flat Earth motivation, because, like, or at least I understand the origins of it, like why people would believe it. But, like, right, like, in this day and age, not so much, or like how it could win people over. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it started off as, like, this, like, it was a Christian thing. Where it's basically like some group of evangelicals I think in England, I want to say, basically said it's like, well, the Bible implies that the Earth is flat, so it must be flat. And then, like, if you say no, yeah. Well, because they're like, you know, it's like in such and such verse, it says, the Lord cast the stars in the sky over the earth like a tent. And it's like, you can't cast a tent over a sphere, therefore the Earth is flat.
I know, I didn't fail math. That's how it works, right?
Well, but it's like, it also explains a lot of their reactions, because it's like, if you say, no, the Earth is round, they don't act like you're arguing against the flat Earth. They act like you're arguing against the existence of God. Which is, in their view, that's what they believe. It's like,
speaking of even more, like, nonsensical math.
Well, yeah, but
like,
the
commutative property of you
like,
offending my faith.
I know, but that's the thing. It started off as an evangelical belief in, like, the late 1800s / early 1900s, where it's like, the Bible says the Earth is flat, therefore it must be flat. And then you can say, like, can't the Earth be round and God be real at the same time? And they're like, no. You Satanist. Why do you hate Jesus so much with your round Earth? But I don't understand how, like, people now could be, like, converted to flat Earthism. You know what I mean?
I don't, but there's a lot of things that I just don't understand. Going back to flat Earth and, like, strange theories like that, like, I don't know how you believe it, except to say that if you believe that there's a giant conspiracy, that all of these tech companies are forming things based off of science, and you already don't trust science, then that's the only way I can believe it. Because the easiest proof to prove that like flat Earth isn't real is by looking at a bunch of NASA images. But if you look at the NASA images, they'll say, oh, well, but there's the one of like the world that's flat. That's the truth. And you say, well, then how do you get from one end of the planet to the other? And I don't know how they prove it, but if I had to guess, it'd probably be something like there's a hole that's ripped in the space-time continuum that transports you or something like that. Like, how do you argue with someone who there's no way to argue with them?
Well, that's the thing. It's like there's a lot of very simple questions that they can't answer. Like, where does the sun go at night? I don't know. How is it morning in America and nighttime in China? I don't know. How does the plane travel from here to here in this amount of time?
Right.
It doesn't. They're lying. You know, like it's just bizarre. I think it's like there's a lot of things. Like, you know, there's that like famous New Age book, The Secret.
No, I haven't heard of this.
Okay, so like The Secret is like one of those things that's really popular with like chicks who are into crystals. It's like
crystals, like when you break open a rock and there's those things and like you put them around your house, like Hank and Break. You didn't watch Breaking Bad, never mind. No. Reference dropped.
It's like the Secret is like, you know, you think about and envision something and you like can manifest it happening. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
You think about something and you can manifest it?
Yeah, so it's like if you think about like becoming a successful actor, you can manifest it in real life and you will become a successful actor.
Okay.
So just accept that this is a book that exists and it says that this thing is doable.
Right. I pulled it up on Wikipedia. Okay.
So I think a lot, like the really batshit crazy stuff, like flat Earth, I think it's like The Secret. It's not about whether or not it's true. It's just like people trying to believe this shit so hard it becomes true.
Like, if they didn't believe so strongly in it, I would almost think it's just a bunch of people who want to be contrarian for contrarian's sake. But the thing is, I'm guessing a lot of these people who are flat earthers bring up the fact that they're flat earthers and then want to convert you to this philosophy continually.
Well, it's not so much that. It's more, I think, the belief in a flat earth is not... It doesn't stand alone. Like, it's part of a larger life philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Believing, like, I don't think people believe in the flat earth because there's any evidence for a flat earth. I think people believe in the flat earth because it supports some other worldview that they already have.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the thing that you said about The Secret quickly, because I didn't read a summary of this, but the idea of like you think that you're a successful actor, the more you think about it, then you can manifest it to come true. Mm-hmm. Like as a form of like, because I remember I was talking to you and you were like self-help book, or no, it was eliminating all negativity in your life is bad. And
oh yeah, I'm very much against the positivity crowd, the positive thinking people.
Yeah. So like I wanted to touch on this because you reminded me of this. Like the idea, if The Secret is promoting the idea of like just thinking about this will make it happen, I do not believe in that happening. But I believe that I can see that putting yourself and thinking about like, let's say like, oh, I want to be in my job. I want to be better in my job, or like I want to get this promotion, can set you on a course where the way that you're thinking about things, you can justify your thoughts about them to be perceived as, because I'm thinking positively about this, I am acting this way in order to get it. It's kind of like a weird fake it till you make it type of thing.
Yes.
With that said, I don't think there are any sort of like, like spirit. I can't believe I'm saying this. Spiritual forces that are being directed your way in sort of some sort of metaphysical thinking. I think the type of mindset you have is important, but it also will lead you to experience certain things where you can justify it as, because I was thinking this way, this thing happened. In the same way of, like, if you have a lot of negative energy or negative thoughts about you, I can't believe I said negative energy. But if you have a lot of negative thoughts, then everything that happens to you, you construe as, this is a slight against me, this is this, everything bad has happened. When all you have to do, if you can, is think about, like, well, like, my socks weren't red because I didn't put them in the washing machine with all of my other red clothes. And, like, that's a positive. That's a net positive. So I know I've gotten into some hippy-dippy territory.
Well,
but, like,
it's fine.
We've jumped off the
We're already there. I mean, the thing with a lot of New Age philosophy, or just kind of spiritualist philosophies in general, is that there's a rational interpretation and then there's a supernatural interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, with the secret stuff, like, there's the psychological rational interpretation, which is, if you believe something to be true, you will act as if it is true, and that can kind of make it happen.
That reinforces the truth. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like, if you think I am a excellent athlete, you will act as if you're an excellent athlete, which may mean you train regularly and eat well and take care of yourself, which may result in you being an excellent athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the supernatural interpretation, which is like, if I believe hard enough that the earth is flat, maybe the earth is flat.
It makes me think of all of those athletes who are like, God is good. We won this because of, because I'm a Raider fan, so obviously, Derek Carr.
Like,
thank God, God is good. God gave us this win. It's like, it reminds me of
it's Derek Carr's magic mascara that gave him the win.
Yeah, his magic mascara and his freaking iron jaw that he's gonna take out all the defenders with, his giant square jaw. But it makes me think of, in Saving Private Ryan, there's that one line like, if God is with us, then who dare stand against us? And it's like, I don't think God works that way. Like, God gave us this win. You're right. Like, while he's doing, like, if you believe in a God, if he's doing all this other stuff because he's all powerful and or all good, he gave you the win. What about the other team who has just as many people who believe in God that wanted to give him the win? There's the metaphysical versus the other. It's like the metaphysical interpretation of that is God gave us the win. The other interpretation of that is, well, the players played well, and their focus point in this case was like, I'm religious. And so, you know what? I want to praise this guy. I want to praise this deity because I won. It's like, praise to Ares because we won the war. It's like, I don't think Ares had anything to do with it, but like, I want to give thanks to Ares because he's the inspiration for us all coming together to win this.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's like, again, the dual interpretations. There's the spiritual interpretation, which is, yes, God personally intervened in my football game so that I, a Christian, along with my team of other athletes who are mostly Christian, could beat this opposing team full of athletes who are also Christian and believe that God is on their side. Or the psychological interpretation of, believing God is with you, kind of gave you the confidence you needed to go out and perform what is, at the end of the day, an extremely difficult series of tasks to secure them.
Which, all of this to say that
Neil Adams shouldn't be writing comic books.
Neil Adams shouldn't be writing comic books. I like watching Aaron Rodgers play, and it's interesting to think that for like the first 3 years he was not a great quarterback, and then he became a god of quarterbacks. That's what I'm getting at.
Dude, it's crazy how Aaron Rodgers is just smoking everyone right now.
I know. I mean, it came out it was a negative for me last week, but man, it's fun. Like, it's fun watching him play, and he does deserve, like, he is a transcendent quarterback to me. If you put Aaron Rodgers in Bill Belichick's system, like, Patriots would never have lost. Well, for about 5 years. Well, we'll say 10 years. And then Aaron Rodgers and Bill Belichick would have butted heads so much that one of them would have had to leave.
Yeah, I mean, if you're that good at anything, you're going to have a couple screws loose, which is why Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady always kind of come off as crazy people.
Do they? I always thought Aaron Rodgers came off as like a sophisticated, intelligent man, and Tom Brady was just a kook.
Well, behind closed doors, supposedly, Aaron Rodgers is a few screws loose.
No.
But his public-facing self, seems very he seems very sophisticated.
He was looking for Danica Patrick's tell-all book about her relationship with Aaron Rodgers.
Well, like, Aaron Rodgers has a bizarre relationship with his family. Like, apparently his whole family hates him.
Is it because he doesn't give them money?
Maybe. He doesn't. Apparently he doesn't like him too much either. But yeah, Tom Brady seems kind of like he's like the kind of guy who he's just locked in a room like all the time, and he's only ever let out to do football. You know, it's like the reason that football players will wear helmets is to protect them from Tom Brady trying to kiss them on the lips. Like, he's that kind of weird. But he's a really good quarterback.
I always found it weird. Like, I remember the Super Bowl. It was Panthers versus Broncos, and like the Panthers lost horribly because Denver's defense basically won the entire Super Bowl because Peyton Manning was atrocious because the coach of the Broncos.
Because Peyton Manning broke his neck 3 times and was 43 years old or whatever.
Well, the other thing was like. That was the season that Peyton Manning came on, and the coach that they got, Gary Kubiak, was like, all right, Peyton, who never has run in his entire life, we're going to make you run with the football. We're going to make you do a lot of, like, out routes to throw, like, we're going to make you do all of these things that you don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And Peyton Manning sucked, and they benched him, and then they brought him back because the other guy they had also sucked and got injured. And then Peyton Manning, and then the defense was so good that they won the Super Bowl. And instead of letting Peyton Manning run his own offense, he ran Gary Kubiak's. But I always remember that like Cam Newton was like torn apart because on the sideline he had negative body energy, and like he was not happy and cheerful when they were doing the post game press conferences and things like that. Mm-hmm. And like someone pointed out, like, we never, ever criticized Tom Brady or Peyton Manning for running over to his wide receiver and chewing them out when they missed through the ball. We never criticized them when Peyton Manning is losing to the Seahawks in the Super Bowl for like leaving the field with like 3 minutes left in the game. Like, we never criticized those guys for doing that, or like Tom Brady. He never comes under criticism for that kind of thing. Bill Belichick protects him, and all of this stuff. And like that always stuck out to me as like I always feel a little bit bad for Cam Newton, even though he's insane, because like he was held to this like incredibly higher standard than other quarterbacks were at that time. Now, part of it's also that Cam Newton's incredibly flamboyant on the field, and he has the Superman thing and things like that. But like I'll always remember that because like Peyton Manning is such a sore loser. Tom Brady is such a sore loser that like it's not okay for other people to be as sore a loser as these guys are, because they had good wide receivers and offensive lines that allowed them to throw it all along the field. So Tom Brady being kind of a nut like that makes me happy, especially with all that stuff with his diet coming out. It's like, you want to get the T12 diet from Tom Brady. Even he likes to eat bad food sometimes, guys. Click here for clickbait. Like,
you know what I don't understand? Why is Michael Sam not allowed to kiss his boyfriend on national TV, but Tom Brady's allowed to kiss Robert Kraft on national TV? Like, that is the biggest double standard in football.
Well, here's my question: is like regarding Michael Sam, do you think the NFL treated him well? Like, obviously it was a PR move to get him signed in the first place, right? For the Rams. Like, it seemed like a PR move. Do you think they handled the whole, like, the first openly gay player in the NFL well? Because, like you said, like, why can't Michael Sam kiss his boyfriend? If I'm the NFL, I'm justifying it as, well, Michael Sam's just not that good of a player, and Tom Brady is. Not to go into too much, like, what did you think with the NFL? But, like, because I don't know if you're, and I can delete all this stuff too, but, like,
well, no, it's just like, but, like, whether or not it's okay for two dudes to kiss each other on a football field should have nothing to do with their playing ability. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. Like, because the NFL is so no homo, ironically, it brings in questions about, like, did they do Michael Sam dirty? I didn't even remember that being a thing where they wouldn't let him kiss his boyfriend on the field.
Well, no, it was I think it was when he got drafted. Like, you know, they had, like, a video of him celebrating on the draft broadcast, and that, like, I guess made some people angry. But it's
and he kissed his boyfriend and they left it in, or did they kiss his boyfriend and they did the awkward 5-second delay?
No, I think he kissed his boyfriend. They left it in on the broadcast. A bunch of viewers complained about it. But it's like, I don't see viewers complaining about Tom Brady making out with, like, every man in sight when they win the Super Bowl. So, like, why the double standard?
Because I guess football isn't as celebrated along the coastal elites as it is in middle America. I don't know. It's
just a puzzling thing. I don't totally understand it.
I mean, but, like, it sounds bad if I say, like, oh yeah, I do understand it. But I mean, it's just, I guess, like, the blatant hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah, just like one version of two dudes kissing is bad, but another version of two dudes kissing is fine.
I think it kind of harkens back to that old Hollywood thing. You know, like, there were actors who could, like, more people are comfortable with straight actors playing gay roles than there are with gay men playing gay roles. I don't think it's right, and I think we've gotten better at it, but, like, there was that whole stigma for a long time in Hollywood that, you know, you couldn't have gay men as movie stars. You couldn't have interracial relationships. And I don't know what moved first, the NFL or Hollywood, because, you know, you have people like Al Davis in the NFL who are like, okay, I'm going to bring in black players, I'm going to bring in black coaches, I'm going to bring in women as CEOs, I'm going to try and break all of these barriers, not necessarily because I'm some revolutionary, but because I think it can give me the competitive edge. Mm-hmm. But, like, you know, like, I think there are still a lot of people who watch media who see, like, oh, well, Hollywood is, you know, quote, trying to be woke, unquote, but still, like, pretend, you know, they pretend like they are, but still reinforce their norms about a lot of that stuff. And in the NFL, they don't even bother. They just appeal to the audience they think they need to appeal to the most at any given time.
That's every cultural institution is just, like, what's the widest range of people that we can appeal to within reason and, you know, make a ton of money.
Yeah.
I mean, Hollywood does all its woke crap, not because they...
Not because they actually are, but because,
not because they're woke, but because they think it's profitable.
Trick people into it. Yeah.
Yeah. They think, like, oh, well, you know, if we have two people of the same gender kissing in Star Wars, that might bring in some more money. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, like let's give it the least. Let's give lip service at best to these things to see if we can. And Disney's the worst at it, by far. But, like, it's like, when I look at the NFL, it's like they wanted to appeal to the woke crowd by having the St. Louis, what a lot of people believe the St. Louis Rams were first to draft Michael Sam very high, but then just as quickly dismiss him off of the field like nothing happened the first time he got an injury. And it's like, well, let's look at the rating board. Did that do better? Did that do worse? Oh, the NFL, like, we're not bringing in the gay football crowd, okay, or the woke football crowd, okay, we're just gonna like brush it aside. And as long as all of the men who are kissing and hugging and touching each other's butts are explicitly heterosexual, then all of the people will find it just fine that grown men are caressing other men's butts. It's fine. Like, it's frustrating because it's like it's an issue that shouldn't be an issue, right? Am I crazy for saying that?
No, you're not. It is an issue that shouldn't be an issue. It's like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah, like, I don't care if your wife, I don't care if you're dating a supermodel. Like, nobody cares who Peyton Manning and Drew Brees are dating. Like, that doesn't matter. What matters is, what you do on the field, or and also, like, are you a good person, or are you an advertising shill like Peyton Manning? Like, those are the things I care about. I don't care about your personal life. Like, that sounds harsh though, because then if you say I don't care about your personal life, then it's like, oh, so I'm not allowed to express myself or express my beliefs. I'm like, I personally don't have a stake in it. So as long as you're not killing children in Uganda, like, as long as it's positivity you're putting out there, then I don't care. But
I don't care what athletes are putting out there, man. As long as they're not like actively harming people, or committing crimes, it
doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's like it's
cool.
like the stick
people.
to sports crowd,
Mm-hmm.
I find it baffling just because it's like these athletes, their opinions are no more or less valid than anyone else's. They just happen to have cameras pointed at them all the time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, any Joe Blow off the street, if they had a camera pointed at them and someone asked, like, what do you think about this political issue? You would give your opinion. I would give my opinion. Any person would give their opinion. If someone felt strongly enough about something and they had a camera pointed at them, they'd say how they felt about it. And it's not like these talking heads on CNN or whatever who are paid to talk about politics are any more qualified than these fucking athletes. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
also, one of the weirder takes I've heard,
yeah,
one of the...
I was gonna say, well, they're better informed, and I'm like, you know what? They're probably not.
They're not really,
probably
though.
not. Like, in all honesty, they might be informed on some things more than others, but maybe. But then, like, CNN's also a bad example because, like, they're all paid to, like, I'm sure that there's some direction in the way that they want to skew it. But maybe that's the perfect example. Like, I agree with you. I don't know. I understand all of the people. Like, I understand the people who are butthurt because athletes are talking out about issues they care about. But athletes have been talking out about issues they care about for decades.
I know.
So, like, really, to be insulted by what they're saying now, what does that really say about the person perceiving it? Which is maybe why I'm not as affected by, like, by all of these players who are like, oh, Black Lives Matter, or, defund the police. I'm like, I understand. Everyone has their opinion on things, and I can research into it as much as I want to. You can keep preaching about it as much as you want to, but you're also, like, your job is to go out there and play football, and I'll be happy to watch you play football. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. Because it's such a slippery slope.
But, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, a lot of athletes are politically ill-informed, but that doesn't prevent me from enjoying football, baseball, MMA, whatever, And also, one of the weirder, like, homophobic sports takes I've heard over the last year was, we're living in a world now where I think MMA is probably more popular than boxing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And Bob Arum, who's a boxing promoter, was like talking shit about the UFC, I think. And one of his criticisms was like, like, two dudes like grappling with no shirts on. Oh, it's kind of sus. Like, it's like what? That's your criticism of MMA? It's like, oh, dude, rear naked choke sounds kind of gay to me. Like, it's like what? That's your problem? That's how you try to get people away from MMA and back into boxing.
You know what's great about boxing? All of those women with those big boobs bringing out the title cards. Like, oh, okay. It's
which they like also have in every MMA. Other combat sport.
I mean, again, like I'll be honest. Like when I first started seeing a lot of MMA stuff, I was like, yeah, I can see how it could be construed as homoerotic. I don't care. Like it's still really interesting and really cool to watch two guys beat down and using one of our two keywords, the efficiency at which they take down their opponents.
Well, that's the other thing too. It's like part of like boxing is a great sport and it's fascinating in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, I get really frustrated watching it because every time I see some guy getting jabbed up, I'm like, why don't you just kick him in the legs? Like,
you gotta mix it up. Gotta throw in some Muay Thai in there, man.
Or it's like, you know, if someone's got crazy head movement and they keep ducking under punches, it's just like knee him in the head every time he ducks down. It's like, oh wait, you can't. Or it's like anytime someone's really elusive, it's like you should tie him up and hit him. And then it's like, oh wait, in boxing you can't hold and hit. If you clinch up, you're not allowed to punch the guy. Like, boxing is just so many extra rules that make it annoying to watch.
I kind of come from the slant of Scorsese. Like, I never watched boxing. I never really cared about it. But I love boxing movies, just like I love most sports movies, as cliched-ridden as they are. But, like, yeah, you're right. Like, MMA did come in and it completely changed the game. And it also kind of proved that oversaturation, like oversaturating the market, as long as you have a good product, is not a huge issue.
No.
Because like the MMA had like it's pretty. Are they in the thousands of MMA events now, or are they still in like MMA 582nd? Like they were numbering every single.
In terms
one
of
for a while.
Well, UFC numbered events, I think they're at like 250 something, but they have like, you know, for every one numbered event, there's like 3 free on TV fight nights, and then there's other promotions that broadcast their shit on TV or online. So, like, I mean,
yeah.
You know, you got the UFC is obviously the big one, but there's other leagues and other promotions that, you know, broadcast their stuff. So there's tons of events.
That's the thing. It's like there's tons of events, and like they all bring in monster numbers, and like the people who started the UFC, like Dana White has to be like I guess he's not one of the richest men in the world because we would know about it, but like he's clearly not hurting for money.
No.
So like it just like it proves that if you have a good product, and like even to an extent, even if you have a decently good product, it's still the case because like there's a reason that certain types of movies oversaturate the market, and the ones that are really good people still see, and the ones that are not so good disappear, but people continue to watch those types of movies. Like saturation of market like look at young adult fiction.
Oh god.
There's still a ton of people who watch young adult fiction. This is my really ham-fisted way of bringing it back to movies. So if you had anything else you wanted to say about MMA or UFC,
no man, just do your thing.
Well, because I wanted to bring it back because like superhero movies are huge and they've oversaturated the market. And I said decently good because most Marvel movies range, depending on who you are, they range from fine to like there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh my god, every Marvel movie is shiny and chrome. I think that they range from fine to witness, like high fine to low witness. But then you have the DC movies that are like, there are some that are just atrociously bad, like Batman v Superman, the theatrical cut, or Justice League, the theatrical cut. Then you have ones that are better. Like, I really like Wonder Woman. Every time I watch it, it gets better. Which was shot on film, by the way. I didn't know that.
Huh.
So, like, the DC movies, you know, especially when they get creator-owned, or like, you know, they let the director kind of have more free will, tend to be better.
Yeah.
But, like, those
when they let film decisions get made by film people instead of business people.
Instead of Jeff Johns and that one guy who got Alan Horn and freaking Zack Snyder. Honestly, when it comes to the Snyder cut, like, kudos to Zack Snyder. I'm glad he gets to finish his vision. I'm glad he gets to do everything he wanted to do. As a filmmaker, I think that's great. Like, I applaud him. But I also, hot take, I do think Joss Whedon got a bit of a bum deal on Justice League. Now, with that said, he still made a ton of money if he ever works again. But
depending on how this whole lawsuit goes or whatever.
Is there a lawsuit against him?
I don't know. I think there's some legal shit going on, I believe. Or an investigation into Ray Fisher's allegations.
The allegations and everything. I mean, like, that time in DC, it was horrible to be in. Like, I understand all of the decision-making that led to Joss Whedon directing less than 50% of the final edited shots in Justice League, which do you know how that works as far as film ownership? Like, or directing credit ownership? So the easiest example to look at is Superman 2. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, go ahead and educate our viewers.
Okay.
Our listeners.
In order to retain a director credit, over half of the shots in the final film have to have been shot with you as the director. For example, at least half of Justice League are shots that Zack Snyder at least oversaw when it was being shot. Mm-hmm. Superman 2 ran into a problem because they fired Richard Donner halfway through production on Superman 2, which was shot concurrently with Superman. And when they brought in the other, what's his name? I can't think of his name. The other Richard to finish it. He had to direct a bunch of scenes and then redirect a bunch of other scenes just so that he could say, I directed this scene. We're putting this version of it in the movie so that Richard Donner doesn't get credit for the movie, which Richard Donner didn't want anyway. Mm-hmm. So you have to direct over 50% of the shots. So it's possible that everyone's complaining because the newest thing that came out was that the aspect ratio of the movie was going to be more square than widescreen, which I know this glazes your eyes, Gabe, because you don't care about aspect ratio. The reason it's significant is it means that a majority of shots that Zack Snyder did were cropped to fit a widescreen aspect ratio, and everyone was like up in arms, and the director of photography came out and was like, I'm so glad we're restoring the square aspect ratio that we always wanted it to be in. Whatever. No more than 50% of those, no more than 49% of those shots were redone in widescreen aspect ratio. Not only that, Zack Snyder is getting post-production, he's getting a chance to do reshoots, which Joss Whedon got a chance to do reshoots, but had to be very quickly done. Zack Snyder's also getting a larger budget to do post-production shots, which they had for the original Justice League, but not nearly as much time as they have now. And Zack Snyder has the benefit of looking back at what worked and what didn't work in the original cut of Justice League. Joss Whedon's one job in making and releasing Justice League was to make, word of the day, the most efficient movie out of a pile of shit. Because there were so many loose tangents, and so he had to take what was roughly at the time probably a 4-hour cut and condense it down into as short a movie as possible to get to the point that they needed to get to. Zack Snyder doesn't have to worry about that. The people at WB and HBO Max and Warner Brothers are like, make it a sprawling epic. The more sprawling, the better. So all of this to say that Joss Whedon came in on a shit deal, did the best that he could with the shit that he had, and now everyone is coming out against him for him trying to do the best that he could given what he was given the directions he was given by WB, and Zack Snyder looks like a flower in a pile of shit. Like, he smells great, everyone else looks bad. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Snyder cut is going to be substantially different and or better than Justice League because it still will have to mainly follow the same plot line.
It still has Steppenwolf as the bad guy, and that's a huge problem.
It's still going to have Steppenwolf as the bad guy. And again, he has had longer now to develop a better look for Steppenwolf. So if your big issue with Steppenwolf as the bad guy in Justice League was the fact that he looked horrible, guess what? He's still going to move the same way, but he might look a little better. And as they said, he's
still going to be boring, though.
He's still going to be boring. He's still going to be a bad villain. They're still going to have these scenes that don't go anywhere and you hate. Like the Themyscira scene is dumb. when he gets the mind box or whatever. The scene with in Aquaman where they have the big bubble around them where Steppenwolf gets the second mother box is dumb. The fight scene in the tunnel might go away, and that was dumb, and the ending might change. But a lot of the beats are going to be the same.
I'm looking forward to Cyborg being sad boy the whole movie, as opposed to just half of the movie, though.
Would you prefer Cyborg being sad boy the whole movie, or Cyborg being booyah the whole movie?
Ugh, that's a tough choice because they're both not good.
I wonder if Joss Whedon, because I rewatched Avengers: Age of Ultron, which I feel like is an underrated movie. It still has a lot of problems, but a lot of people are like, oh, it's one of the worst Marvel movies, and I'm like, I don't know. It's at least more interesting thematically than some of the other movies. But
I feel like everyone just forgets Iron Man 3 exists.
I know. My fiance wants to do a rewatch of all of the Marvel movies, and every time like I go down the list, I'm like, can I just I would rather watch Thor: The Dark World than Iron Man 3.
I remember somebody once told me, like, Iron Man 3 is bad, but nothing I could ever say would prepare you for how bad it is. And they were right. They were absolutely right.
It's Misfire the movie.
Yeah, nothing I can say about Iron Man 3 will ever prepare you for how bad Iron Man 3 actually is.
God, it's so... And what's sad is, like, for example, Guy Pearce is the main bad guy. It's like, man, that should be awesome. No, it's not. It's really
Well, you get to see Guy Pearce shout, "I am the Mandarin," and then turn into a fire-breathing dragon.
See, that sounds cool. The actual effect in the movie, not so much. The moment you realize that you really need to cap Shane Black's budget, or just give him a lot of time to do his movies, otherwise
not hire Shane Black. Just have him do stuff like The Nice Guys and nothing else.
And yeah, nothing else. Just let him crowdsource his budgets for movies. Anyway, that was my rant on Justice League that I've been wanting to say for a while.
No, that was good. I think that's a good place to end it because I got to get going.
Sounds good, man. This was like the filler episode in an anime.
Yeah. This is the beach episode in a shonen anime.
Not even. This is the studio imposed. We need to keep the time slot, so we need to keep people coming and sucking the sweet teat of this anime episode. At least sometimes the beach episode is worked into the manga. Not in this case. Not at all.
Not in this case.
That was the beach episode. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe. Also, all of the plugs.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Facebook, YouTube, underthewheels.com, underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com. Music by Mike. The views expressed in this podcast are the views of no one, and we do not endorse them in any way.
The views are their own, except when they are not their own. Speaking of views, after we're done here, I am really excited to read your article, Will Dune Be Any Good?
Thank you.
I am very excited to look into this. I already have it pulled up on my computer, and if you haven't looked at our articles, we don't have as many articles as we would like. We're hoping to turn that around, but definitely give them a look, a read. I think you'll get a lot out of them. I know I certainly have both, especially with the Battle for Bikini Bottom review. I thought that was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, the website's got some good shit on it that we don't really cover in the podcast, so it's definitely worth checking out. Also, please, subscribe on YouTube, on Facebook, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. It's really helpful if you enjoy the show. For getting the show in front of other people who may also enjoy it.
Yep, I had a friend just subscribe to us on YouTube.
Nice.
And yeah, so again, there's many ways to access the podcast. please send us email underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com if you have any information, kudos, questions, complaints, or topics you want us to cover.
If you have proof that the Earth is hollow, also send that to underthewheelspodcast@gmail.com.
100% do that. Flat Earthers, no. But Hollow Earthers, yes. Hollow Earthers approved.
Flat Earth is boring. Hollow Earth has dinosaurs in the center of the Earth, and that's inherently awesome.
As we all know from bad 80s sci-fi movies, dinosaurs make everything better.
Oh, hell yeah. As we all know from frickin' Jules Verne, dinosaurs make everything better.
I can imagine like 300 years down the line or the next apocalypse, someone stumbles upon 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or something, or 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they're like, this is the new Bible. Dinosaurs exist.
And on that note,
I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been Under the Wheels.
This is super not interesting to me.
Finished.